His pupils involuntarily widened as he screamed, "Wu, be careful behind you!" Wu Jingran was shocked and slapped backwards with his palm. The fire underworld divine palm was more than enough to deal with Junko, but after all, Wu Jingran had not cultivated the fire underworld divine palm to the peak. Therefore, this seemingly tyrannical palm did not cause any waves, and was easily dissolved by the Imperial Preceptor behind him. The Imperial Preceptor had used the Earth Escape technique to escape behind Wu Jingran, and then took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. How could Wu Jingran be his opponent? Wu Jingran fell into the Imperial Preceptor's palm, and the broken sword was placed on her neck, forming a sharp contrast with her white and tender skin. The Imperial Preceptor's head popped out from behind Wu Jingran, and he clicked his tongue and said, "Tang Zheng, you are really powerful, far beyond my expectations. Whether it is you, this huge monster, or that little guy, you have all broadened my horizons." Imperial Preceptor, what are you doing? Tang Zheng was unable to restrain his anger as he asked, "Hey, don't you know what I want to do? If you obediently surrender, then I will let her go. Otherwise, I will let you watch her die. In any case, she is of no use to me. If I kill her, then kill her. It is not a pity at all," the Imperial Advisor said with a murderous aura, as if the broken sword in his hand could cut Wu's throat at any time. Tang Zheng was flustered and exasperated, but he was speechless. This was a battlefield, cruel, and the slightest mistake would cause the situation to take a turn for the worse. However, in the end, Tang Zheng did not expect that the Imperial Preceptor, a Grandmaster of a generation, would actually use someone else to threaten Tang Zheng. This was not the bearing of a Grandmaster of a generation. Obviously, the Imperial Preceptor was a person who was guided by his goals. As long as he could achieve his goals, the process and methods were not important. "I will count to 3. If you don't come out from there, I will immediately kill her in front of you." The Imperial Preceptor threatened. Without a doubt, he was not bluffing, so Tang Zheng did not dare to be careless and immediately shouted, "No, I'll come out. Don't worry about me." Wu shouted loudly, "Be good, you can't die." Tang Zheng advised, "If you come out, both of us will die, but I can't watch you die without doing anything. Then I'll die immediately. You don't have to be threatened anymore," Marshall said resolutely. Then, with a tilt of his neck, he slashed towards the broken sword. "Haha, are you courting death? It's not that easy." The Imperial Preceptor tapped on Marshall's body, and her acupoints were immediately sealed. She could no longer move and could not even commit suicide. Marshall could not help but reveal a look of despair as he roared with a heart-wrenching voice, "If you have the guts, then kill me." "Hee, if Tang Zheng doesn't do as I say, I will definitely kill you without hesitation," the Imperial Preceptor said with a smile. "I'll start counting. 1. As soon as this number came out, Tang Zheng immediately jumped out of the Four Symbols Venerable's body and shouted, "Don't kill her. I'm out." When he jumped down from the Four Symbols Venerable, he immediately put him into the Sumeru pouch. Seeing that, the Imperial Preceptor's eyes immediately burned with passion. He sized up Tang Zheng from head to toe like a monster looking at Tang Seng's meat, wishing that he could immediately pounce on him and eat him. "Why are you doing this? For me, it's not worth it." Marshall's emotions were extremely complicated. He was both regretful and moved. If he did not drag him down, then Tang Zheng would not have been threatened. At this moment, she hated herself to the core. She had never hated herself so much before. She was too useless and would only drag him down. Why didn't she just die? Tang Zheng forced a smile. "How could I just watch you die? What's so scary about death? At most, I'll accompany you." Marshall's emotions rose and fell. His eyes became moist, and he really had the urge to cry. In this world, other than master and mistress. No one had ever treated her so well. They didn't even care about their own lives for her. If I have a next life, I'll still be your woman. She silently made up her mind in her heart. In this life, she had already decided to follow Tang Zheng, and that was to be his woman. Even though this was a promise she had made to Tang Zheng, but at this moment, her heart had completely melted. She was truly devoted to him, not only in this life, but also in the next life. She wanted to chase after him and be his woman. Marshall didn't know much about love, but there was one thing she understood very well. If a person was willing to risk his life for her, then she would be willing to follow him wholeheartedly. All of this was so simple. There weren't so many reasons, nor were there so many grand things about love. Simple, direct, straightforward. When Li Xiaotian saw this scene, she couldn't help but feel a little jealous of Marshall. Her thoughts were even more meticulous than Marshall, but she also understood how difficult it was for a man to sacrifice his life for a woman. This kind of thing was almost extinct. But Wu's luck was too good. He had met someone like Tang Zheng just like that. She was a little annoyed and felt that she was a little pitiful. She had schemed and schemed everywhere, but in the end, what she got was far less than a careless and foolish woman like Wu. No, I want more. If others have it, I want it too. If others don't have it, I want it too. Li Xiaotian silently clenched his fists. It's truly moving. You're actually willing to give up your life for her. The imperial advisor laughed in surprise and said disdainfully, "Is this the love that you young people are talking about?" Chapter 683. The imperial tutor had already guessed Tang Zheng's intentions and said, "You want me to let her go?" "Smart," Tang Zheng praised. "But if I let her go, wouldn't you regain your freedom?" The imperial tutor said unwillingly. Tang Zheng smiled, but did not say anything. It was obvious that he had the imperial tutor in his grasp. The state preceptor's small eyes narrowed into slits as he stared at Tang Zheng, his eyeballs rolling around in circles. Suddenly, he said in a clear voice, "All right, I promise you, let her go." Tang Zheng was overjoyed. The move that he came up with in a hurry was indeed effective. But before he could be happy, he heard the imperial tutor continue, "But I am not an idiot. I will let you go." "What do you mean?" Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. The imperial tutor's eyes flashed with a hint of sternness as he grabbed Wu's neck with his 5 fingers. She had no choice but to open her mouth, and a pill was immediately sent into her mouth. Tang Zheng turned pale with fright and said, "What did you feed her?" "I don't trust you, so of course I have to leave a backup plan." The imperial tutor said sternly, "She ate the heart-devouring pill. If there is no antidote, her heart will be devoured and she will die from bleeding from her 7 orifices." Tang Zheng's face was ashen as he gritted his teeth and said, "You are too ruthless." "Hee, thank you for the compliment. However, as long as you obediently tell me what I want, she will not die. I will give her the antidote." Tang Zheng's anger surged out. The imperial tutor was indeed an old fox. He was actually able to counter every move and grab onto Tang Zheng's life. "Don't use your life to threaten me. If you still want to play tricks, I won't take the things in your mind. According to my information, you are not the only cultivator in Huaxia. The cultivators are already gradually rising. It won't be too difficult for me to find someone to replace you." Tang Zheng already had no way out. "All right, then let her go first. I'll go over and let you do whatever you want with me." Tang Zheng walked towards the state preceptor again. The state preceptor unsealed Wu's acupoints and smiled as he released his hand and said, "Sure." Wu regained his freedom, his eyes filled with tears. He kept shaking his head and said, "No, why are you so stupid? I am not worth your life." Tang Zheng took 2 steps forward and arrived in front of Wu, pulling her over. Wu threw himself into her embrace and sobbed, "I won't allow you to go over. Don't go over. My life is not worth you paying so much." Tang Zheng caressed her tear-stained cheeks and revealed a brilliant smile. "Don't be silly. You have to live well and live on strong." Wu looked at him. The two of them were about the same height. Their eyes met, full of affection. She shook her head like a rattle drum and said resolutely, "Without you, can I still live in this world? Even if you are the holy maiden of the Li Palace, you can forget about leaving this place today." The state preceptor roared and reached out to grab Tang Zheng. The situation had changed, and he did not want the cooked duck to fly away. As long as Tang Zheng fell into his hands, even if Tang Zheng wanted to commit suicide, he would not be able to do so. Then his goal would have been achieved. But things did not go as he wished. The heavens were not helping him. Just as he reached out, the sun-shooting arrow on the ground flew up again and shot towards his chest. This unforeseen event shocked him. He had never expected that the sun-shooting arrow, which had lost its threat, would suddenly fly up again. With Li Xiaotian's cultivation, he did not have the ability to control an arrow through the air. But the facts were the best proof. There was no room for falsehood. The threat of the sun-shooting arrow shooting towards his chest multiplied, making it impossible for him to ignore it. He couldn't even raise his broken sword to block it. Retreat. He only had this one path. Thus he retreated. With this retreat, the distance between him and Tang Zheng was once more widened. A person appeared between him and Tang Zheng like a whirlwind, grabbing Tang Zheng's hand and urgently shouting, "Let's go!" This person was Li Xiaotian. Tang Zheng hesitated. Marshall's life was still in the hands of the state preceptor. If he left just like that, would Marshall not be able to live? Moreover, how could Li Xiaotian be so kind as to save him? Could it be another conspiracy? He really felt a little scared. Li Xiaotian's cunning image had already entered his heart, and he did not dare to believe it so easily. Li Xiaotian only took a glance at him and saw through his thoughts. He immediately said, "I'm here to save you. I have a way to save Marshall." Hearing that, Tang Zheng no longer hesitated. He turned around and ran. At the same time, he grabbed Marshall's hand. Like a headless fly, he ran away with large strides. Li Xiaotian angrily stomped his feet, cursing in his heart, "You ran faster than me, but you still foolishly sent yourself to death. What a complete idiot." She also hurriedly chased after him. The three of them ran as fast as lightning. Seeing this, the state preceptor was so angry that smoke almost came out of his 7 orifices. He shouted loudly, "Stop right there! I will kill all of you. None of you will be left alive." The three of them were not idiots, so they did not stop. Instead, they ran even faster, and the sun-shooting arrow had long since been taken back by Li Xiaotian. The state preceptor had already discovered that the tail of the sun-shooting arrow had a thin thread that was hard to see with the naked eye. That was why Li Xiaotian was able to control it from afar and catch him off guard. This is the Imperial Preceptor's mansion. There are formations set up by the Imperial Preceptors. Let's see where you can run to. The state preceptor was not in a hurry to chase after them because he believed that the thick fog could trap the three of them. They had already arrived at the narrow path that they came in from. In front of them was the thick fog. Li Xiaotian followed the pattern and pressed a command medallion into the whirlpool. Originally, the dense fog should have dissipated and an exit should have appeared. However, this time there was no reaction at all. Tang Zheng secretly cursed and said, "Your command medallion has lost its effectiveness. Ha! You guys run. In this Imperial Preceptor's mansion without my permission, you guys won't be able to fly out even if you have wings." The state preceptor laughed sinisterly. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. At the last moment, such a situation had occurred. Could it be that the heavens wanted them to die? However, the three of them were not people who would give up so easily. Seeing that the state preceptor had caught up, the three of them turned around and rushed to the side. Hee, continue to run. Once you're exhausted, you won't need me to do anything, the state preceptor said calmly. Whoosh, whoosh, the wind whistled in their ears. The three of them did not dare to stop and rushed forward with all their might. Suddenly, a bamboo forest appeared in front of him. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. With an obstacle, he could effectively delay the state preceptor. Thus, without any hesitation, he pulled Wu's hand and took the lead to rush into the bamboo forest. When Li Xiaotian saw the bamboo forest, a thought flashed through his mind. He immediately realized where he was and subconsciously stopped in his tracks. He blurted out, "Don't go in." However, it was already too late. Tang Zheng and Wu rushed in without hesitation, completely ignoring her words. She stomped her feet hatefully and said, "A dog biting Lu Dongbin, you don't know how to appreciate kindness. I can be considered to have been killed by you guys." Turning her head to look, the state preceptor had already caught up. She did not dare to stay any longer. With a gust of wind under her feet, she also rushed into the bamboo forest. This bamboo forest was, of course, the sword forest that had caused her to suffer a loss. That was why she was so afraid. She was very clear that there were too many strange things in this sword forest, and this was also an important place in the state preceptor's mansion. If she were to barge in, wouldn't she be like a sheep walking into a tiger's den, walking right into a trap? However, Tang Zheng's actions made her unable to think about all of this. She chased after them as fast as lightning. Looking at the two of them holding hands, she felt that it was especially dazzling. Thus, she said snappily, "Are you guys courting death? This is the sword forest of the state preceptor's mansion. If we rush in, what if we encounter danger?" "Sword forest?" Tang Zheng raised his thick eyebrows. "What do you mean?" Tang Zheng thought indignantly. Even so, he did not intend to compromise. He was prepared to try and see if he could help her get rid of this damned thing. Hearing that, Wu's body slightly stiffened. He took a deep breath and held his breath as he looked deeply at Tang Zheng. He knew that he was going to heal her. Her true qi flowed to the outside of the cluster of goo worms. Suddenly, the goo worms shook as if they were stimulated. Those tentacles quickly grew and drilled into her heart. Wu's facial muscles immediately contorted as he screamed in pain. Beads of sweat dripped down from his forehead like rain. Tang Zheng was shocked and quickly asked, "Marshal, what's wrong with you?" I'm fine." Wu clenched his teeth and held on, but in an instant he opened his mouth and let out a mournful scream. Tang Zheng saw those tentacles crazily drilling into Marshal's heart, and Tang Zheng's heart felt as if it had been ruthlessly stabbed by a knife. He already understood the power of this goo worm, and although his true qi was powerful, it would definitely have a harmful effect on the goo worm. It was precisely because the goo worm had sensed danger that it would counterattack without any regard for its life. If Tang Zheng continued, perhaps the goo worm would die, but Wu's heart would also be devoured by the goo worm. In that case, everything would lose its meaning. Tang Zheng unwillingly withdrew his innate qi. As expected, those tentacles stopped moving and did not continue to drill into Wu's heart. However, they were still greedily sucking the blood from the heart. At this moment, those tentacles had already wrapped around half of the heart, and the speed at which they absorbed the blood became even faster. Wu stopped screaming and gasped for breath. His face turned from red to pale as he asked weakly, "How is it?" Tang Zheng's face was gloomy as he resolutely said, "I will definitely think of a way to cure your poison." Wu was dejected. Since he said so, then the situation was especially serious. She looked deeply at Tang Zheng, squeezed out a smile, and said, "It doesn't matter. Life and death are fated. I'm not afraid." Chapter 685. Li Xiaotian looked at the two of them clasped hands and Tang Zheng's resolute eyes. In a trance, she actually had an impulse to change to martial. However, the wolf quickly gained the upper hand. She said seriously, "If you don't leave this place, you won't be able to cure her wholeheartedly. Therefore, leaving this place is the most important thing." Tang Zheng glanced at her from the corner of his eyes, supported Marshall, and walked forward. Li Xiaotian knew that his image in Tang Zheng's eyes had once again fallen, so he followed without saying a word. As far as the eye could see, there were many green bamboos that pierced the sky. The three of them had already walked for a period of time, but the bamboo forest seemed to have no end. Li Xiaotian said worriedly, "The last time I encountered this situation, it was also very strange. Moreover, these bamboos are very strange. Even my arrows can't break them." Tang Zheng was shocked and asked, "Really?" Li Xiaotian nodded his head heavily. Tang Zheng reached out and stroked the green bamboo. It was no different from ordinary bamboo, but why was it so stubborn? Even Li Xiaotian's arrow could not harm it in the slightest. "How is it?" Li Xiaotian asked. Tang Zheng did not say a word. His figure flashed, and he began to wander around the bamboo forest. His fingers would occasionally tap on the green bamboo. Li Xiao, Tian, and Marshall looked at him nervously, not knowing what the result would be. Suddenly, Tang Zheng stopped in his tracks. His brows were tightly knitted as he said, "This is an array formation. Is there a way to get out?" Li Xiaotian asked anxiously. You want to go out? Once you enter the sword forest, you will be a puppet in my hands, at my mercy. You still want to go out? You must be dreaming." An arrogant laughter suddenly came from the sky. If it was not the imperial advisor, who else could it be? The three of them were shocked. Tang Zheng immediately stood in front of Marshall to protect him. Li Xiaotian glanced at him and could not help but turn pale. The three of them looked up at the sky at the same time. Other than the bamboo forest, there was not a single ghost in sight. "You don't have to look for me. If I don't show myself, you won't be able to find me." The state preceptor obviously knew their actions like the back of his hand. He said proudly, "How was the taste of the poison? Tang Zheng, this is all your fault. You killed her." "Nonsense," Marshall retorted loudly. "All of this is your scheme." You still have the strength to refute me. You do have some perseverance. But soon you will run out of strength. You can only lie on the ground and beg for mercy. In the end, you will bleed from your 7 orifices and die. That feeling, I am afraid I will not forget even if I become a ghost. Marshall's expression changed slightly as she faintly felt the pain in her heart increase. The goo worm was causing more and more damage to her. He seemed to have realized that the green bamboos were all illusions. Their true colors were streaks of sword chi. No wonder weapons were unable to harm them in the slightest because they did not have a physical body. The green bamboos were just illusions. Who exactly thought of this method to actually condense so much sword chi? Comprehending sword techniques in this kind of environment is indeed twice the result with half the effort. Every blade of grass and tree here was compatible with the way of the sword. As long as one used their heart to sense it, coupled with a certain amount of talent and cultivation as a foundation, it would not be difficult to comprehend sword techniques. When he quietly sensed the sword chi, the innate chi in his body involuntarily sped up. The heaven-flying immortal's sword technique also began to circulate on its own. He subconsciously raised the war soul sword. Swish, sword light flashed, and the War Soul Sword drew a beautiful sword light in the air. Wind rising, clouds surging. Although Tang Zheng still had his eyes closed, he still recognized this sword move. The innate qi quickly circulated according to the path of the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique. This sword move was naturally used, completely out of his control. It was as if something had triggered the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique. His heart suddenly became clear. It must be because of this sword forest. Other people could comprehend sword techniques here, but the heaven-flying immortal's sword technique was too high level. He did not need to spend too much effort to comprehend it. The sword forest naturally triggered this point. Immediately, he swept away the dejection and bad luck from before and became spirited. He quietly felt the changes in his body. The heaven-flying immortals had a total of 6 moves, and each move had 36 moves. It was incomparably complicated and varied. Previously, he had only cultivated to the 5th move, Return to Origin. He had not even touched the threshold of the 6th move. The 6th move was the peak of this sword technique. Of course, it was not easy to cultivate. The innate qi was still circulating rapidly in his meridians, and the War Soul Sword in his hand still did not stop, sword breaking 10,000 caddies. The 2nd move of the heaven-flying immortals. Next, 3rd move, Lightning Fire Sword. 4th move, Heaven Falls and Earth Rends. 5th move, Return to Origin. The innate qi still did not stop. Tang Zheng felt like he was a balloon. The innate qi had already filled his entire body and was about to explode. The War Soul Sword was completed in one go, and these 5 moves were unleashed in an instant. Puff, puff, puff. The green bamboo was slashed by the sword again, and then it quickly returned to its original appearance. Tang Zheng seemed to be still doing useless work. Wu and Li Xiaotian looked at him worriedly, but seeing that he was immersed in it, they did not say anything to disturb him. Only the 2 of them clenched their hands tightly, their palms drenched in cold sweat. The Imperial Advisor's laughter was still deafening, continuously ridiculing Tang Zheng for overestimating himself and only knowing how to do such useless work. The War Soul Sword danced faster and faster, the sword light intertwining, becoming denser and denser. The Imperial Advisor's smile gradually weakened, and in the end, it disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was a cry of alarm. "What are you doing?" Of course, Tang Zheng would not answer him. He just kept on waving the War Soul Sword, causing the true qi in his meridians to circulate even faster. Traces of enlightenment appeared in his mind. A gust of wind suddenly blew in the sword forest. This gust of wind rose from the soles of Tang Zheng's feet and soared upwards, causing the bamboo leaves to flutter and the green bamboos to sway with the wind. "Stop!" the Imperial Advisor roared, and a figure suddenly appeared not far away, rushing over with lightning speed. Seeing that, Wu and Li Xiaotian rushed forward at the same time. The sun-shooting arrow pierced through the air and shot straight towards the Imperial Advisor. Wu's palms turned fiery red, and the fire underworld palm once again displayed its might. The sword light flashed, and the broken sword in the Imperial Advisor's hand exploded with a resplendent light. The sun-shooting arrow flew back, and after the fire underworld god's palm struck the broken sword, the huge recoil caused her to quickly retreat. The 2 of them worked together, but were unable to stop the Imperial Advisor. However, they were very clear that since the Imperial Advisor was so nervous, it must be because Tang Zheng had gained something. They had to stop the Imperial Advisor from getting close to Tang Zheng, even if they had to risk their lives. Thus, the 2 of them charged forward once again. "Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish." The Imperial Advisor roared, Ding Dang shouted, and a sword light slashed into the void at the tail of the sun-shooting arrow. The thin thread that was hard to see with the naked eye was cut off, and the sun-shooting arrow's attack decreased sharply. After being blocked by the broken sword, it flew out diagonally. Li Xiaotian leaped into the air, wanting to catch the sun-shooting arrow. This was her treasure, the divine weapon that she had obtained from Tang Zheng with great difficulty. She could not lose it just like that. The imperial advisor saw through her thoughts. With a flash of sword light, the broken sword blocked her path, and even the iron bow in her hand was cut into two. Li Xiaotian immediately retreated, barely dodging the attack. Looking at the iron bow in her hand that was broken into two pieces, she could not help but reveal a look of regret. Chapter 686. Marshall fell to the ground, her entire body twitching in pain. Her face was devoid of blood, her pupils dilated, gradually losing their color. Her consciousness was gradually blurring, the scene in front of her quickly spinning. She felt as if her heart was about to stop beating. No, her heart was about to disappear. A heart-wrenching pain. She finally knew what it was like. The imperial tutor smiled in satisfaction and said, "Now you know how powerful it is." He walked past her in large strides and headed straight for Tang Zheng. Li Xiaotian clenched her teeth and secretly said, "Go all out." Her figure flashed and blocked in front of the imperial tutor. However, she was not in a hurry to make a move because she knew that she was not the imperial tutor's opponent. If she made a move, it would mean that she would lose. Her goal was to delay the imperial tutor and buy time for Tang Zheng. The imperial tutor looked at Li Xiaotian with a murderous look and said, "You did not hesitate to sacrifice your life for him. Is it really worth it? You are the holy maiden of Li Palace." Li Xiaotian lightly said, "Whether it is worth it or not, I am the clearest about it." "Ha! Since you are so muddle-headed, then there is no need for me to persuade you. Li Palace's palace master knows that I killed you, so he can't do anything to me. Moreover, with Tang Zheng's technique, a mere Li Palace can be turned into ashes in the blink of an eye." The imperial tutor arrogantly said, "Don't boast too early. Be careful not to sprain your tongue." The imperial tutor smiled and did not comment. He raised his leg and walked towards Li Xiaotian. "Wait a minute." Li Xiaotian immediately reached out her hand to stop him. The imperial tutor subconsciously stopped and said, "What? You still have your last words?" Li Xiaotian rolled her eyes and said, "Yes." Too late. The imperial tutor did not give her the chance and directly chopped at her with the broken sword. Puff! Li Xiaotian's clothes were cut open and blood splattered out. She was injured. With just one sword, without the shooting sun arrow, she could not block one of the imperial tutor's attacks. The imperial preceptor arrogantly chased after him and said, "You are too weak. There is no challenge or sense of accomplishment in killing you." Li Xiaotian's eyes flashed with despair. This was the result of trying to be brave. If he didn't pretend to be a good person, he wouldn't have fallen to such a state. From the corner of her eyes, she glanced at Tang Zheng and discovered that his eyes were still tightly shut. The war soul sword in his hand was like a tiger giving birth to wind, as fast as lightning, causing the wind in the sword forest to become even stronger. "Tang Zheng, I hope I've bought enough time for you," she thought in despair. She unwillingly raised her head to block, but the imperial preceptor's broken sword was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper. She could not block it at all. As long as the broken sword fell again, her life would come to an end. Whoosh! A strand of hair on her forehead was sliced into two by the sword chi. She could even feel a burning pain on her cheeks. Creak, creak. Suddenly, a cry sounded in her ears. Then, a ball of fire brushed past her body and soared into the air, spraying towards the imperial preceptor. The heat wave hit him in the face. The imperial preceptor had no choice but to take half a step back. Li Xiaotian also hurriedly retreated, escaping from the gates of hell. Turning her head, she found that Xiaobai was standing by her feet. He raised his little head and pouted his little mouth as he spat out fire. Li Xiaotian was overjoyed. She couldn't wait to hug Xiaobai and kiss him. She had seen Xiaobai's power, so she hurriedly urged, "Xiaobai, burn him to death." The Imperial Preceptor was burned by the fire and appeared to be in a sorry state. He angrily roared, "Little bastard, you escaped a calamity before. This time, without Tang Zheng, I want to see what kind of waves you can stir up." Xiaobai screamed again and did not retreat an inch. "Die!" the Imperial Preceptor shouted as the broken sword in his hand slashed down. Boom! Flames soared into the air and completely enveloped the broken sword. However, the broken sword immediately burst out a bright sword light, suppressing the flames and pressing forward. The flames retreated bit by bit. Xiaobai's claws dug deep into the soil, resisting the impact of the broken sword with difficulty. Gradually, the look in his eyes became dim. Previously, in the battle with the water sword, he had consumed a lot of energy and had not recovered yet. But in order to protect Tang Zheng, he resolutely stood out. But now he was exhausted and had reached the end. He turned his head and glanced at Tang Zheng, as if to say his final farewell. Then he clenched his teeth and let out a sharp cry. The flames suddenly exploded. The broken sword swung back. The Imperial Preceptor's arm suddenly shook, and the broken sword almost flew out of his hand. He was shocked. This little guy's strength really made him look at him with new eyes. But after all, he was an expert who had experienced hundreds of battles. He understood that, at this critical moment, he could not drop the ball. Thus, he endured the rebounding force from the broken sword and swung it down again. Whoosh! The air was quickly split into two halves. The sword chi fell on Xiaobai's head. In the next second, it seemed to be split into two. Li Xiaotian saw this, but there was nothing he could do. He unwillingly shouted, "No," but it was useless. Clang! With a muffled sound, the broken sword bounced up and flew out of the Imperial Preceptor's hand. The Imperial Preceptor was stunned and exclaimed, "How could this be?" Looking carefully, he saw a huge turtle shell in front of Xiaobai, completely covering Xiaobai. There was a white mark on the turtle shell. Apparently, it was left by the broken sword. However, the sword spirit had always been silent, and other than discovering that it had allowed the War Soul sword to level up to a heaven-level magic treasure, it did not display any other mystical abilities, so he temporarily threw it to the back of his mind. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the sword spirit took the initiative to speak. "You're saying that the sword chi has a spirit. As long as I can communicate with it, I can collect all the sword chi for my own use?" Tang Zheng asked in surprise. With so many sword chi, if he could collect them all, then Tang Zheng's cultivation would definitely advance by leaps and bounds. It was completely a blessing in disguise. "Yes," the sword spirit replied. "I can help master." "How can you help me?" "The sword spirit has a spirit. The sword chi also has a spirit. The two are connected and can be fused into one." The sword spirit said, solemnly, "Then hurry up and act." Tang Zheng had already seen the Imperial Tutor pass Gui Qian Sui and Xiaobai and fly above his head. He was condescending and slashed down with his sword. He was bound to heavily injure him. He had no time to resist. He could only place his hopes on the sword spirit. The sword spirit received the order. The battle soul's sword light shone brightly like a bright sun. A buzzing sword sound rang out as if it was speaking. Then a strange scene appeared. Buzzing sounds immediately rose and fell from all directions. It was like an echo in response to the battle soul's sword cry. These sounds seemed to be communicating with each other. It was ringing nonstop. The imperial tutor, who was in midair, had a huge change in expression. Although he did not understand what the buzzing sound meant, he had already sensed that the aura in the sword forest had undergone an earth-shattering change. It was a change that made him afraid. A strong wind blew, and the green bamboo swayed nonstop. The sound of shattering rose and fell one after another. The imperial tutor had no choice but to stop his attack. He landed on the ground and looked around. Looking at the chaotic sword forest, he shouted, "What's going on?" There was a mysterious connection between him and the sword forest. This was a special connection that all the imperial tutors of the past would cultivate. Therefore, the imperial tutor could control everything in the sword forest as he wished. But at this moment, he realized that this connection was rapidly weakening. This was unprecedented and unheard of. All the imperial tutors had never encountered such a thing. Gradually, his eyes revealed fear for the first time. It was a fear that came from the bottom of his heart. Only with special materials could they be forged into flying swords. Although the War Soul sword was already a heaven-level magic treasure, it was still not a flying sword, which was why Tang Zheng did not often use the imperial sword technique. But now that he had finally comprehended the sixth move of the flying immortals from heaven, everything had changed. Flying immortals from heaven, as the name suggested, were like immortals flying from the heavens. This immortal was the sword, and the sword in his hand turned into an immortal. It was like an arm, and wherever he pointed, it would be there. It was perfectly compatible with the essence of the imperial sword technique, merging the two into one. Tang Zheng was able to control the sword so smoothly through the air. The imperial advisor was extremely regretful. He did not investigate clearly, causing his efforts to be in vain and his losses to be huge. Seeing the War Soul sword carrying a berserk aura attack him once again, the imperial advisor was unarmed and did not fight back. With a thought, he disappeared without a trace. Boom! The War Soul sword slashed onto the ground, causing mud to fly up. Escape technique. Tang Zheng was awe-inspiring. The imperial advisor had an escape technique. So even if he had comprehended the sixth move of the flying immortals from heaven, it would still be useless. He definitely won't be willing to escape like this. He must be hiding somewhere, waiting for an opportunity. With regards to the imperial advisor's sinister methods, Tang Zheng still remembered them clearly. He immediately came in front of Wu Mian, afraid that the imperial advisor would take her hostage again. Marshall was in a daze, his entire body twitching, his eyes rolled back, as if he could lose his life at any moment. What should we do? He was already certain that his innate qi would only stimulate the goo, allowing it to take Marshall's life even faster. So he did not dare to act rashly. "Marshall, I will always be by your side. You must persevere. I will definitely find a way to save you." Tang Zheng whispered into Marshall's ear, not knowing if she could hear him. Li Xiaotian did not have the mood to care about Marshall's life and death. She was looking around in surprise and shouted, "The sword forest has disappeared." The sword forest had indeed disappeared. The originally lush green bamboo had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a vast and empty wasteland. The village not far away also entered her eyes, but the dense white fog in the distance caused her heart to instantly fall to the bottom. Although they had escaped the shackles of the sword forest, they were still trapped in the imperial advisor's mansion. The thick fog outside was still an insurmountable barrier. "Let's leave this place quickly," Li Xiaotian urged. Tang Zheng swept his eyebrows, causing Li Xiaotian's heart to tighten. He had the urge to retreat and exclaimed, "Your cultivation!" Tang Zheng coldly snorted, but did not reply. Just now, when the sword qi entered his body, it caused his innate qi to soar, breaking through to the 9th level of Anidia in one fell swoop. From the 7th level of Anidia to the 9th level of Anidia, 2 levels of cultivation had broken through like a hot knife through butter. This was only a portion of the sword chi. The majority of the sword chi had been absorbed by the War Soul Sword's sword spirit. One could imagine how powerful the sword chi contained within the sword forest was. It was simply a treasure trove. No wonder the Imperial Advisor's mansion regarded it as an important place. It was a pity that the Imperial Advisor did not know how powerful the heaven-flying immortal sword technique that Tang Zheng cultivated was, nor did he know that the War Soul Sword contained a sword spirit. Therefore, Tang Zheng was able to take advantage of such a great opportunity and absorb all the sword chi in the sword forest. Without the nourishment of the sword chi, the treasured swords that were originally buried in the soil also disappeared, turning into strands of sword chi that merged into the War Soul Sword. At this moment, the War Soul Sword had already undergone quite a few changes. The originally dark sword body had mottled bright spots, like a dusty pearl that had finally revealed the tip of an iceberg. Li Xiaotian recalled the frightening situation just now, especially the last few sword strikes of Tang Zheng, forcing the Imperial Advisor to flee in a sorry state. She couldn't help but feel intoxicated. At the same time, she also felt a deep sense of powerlessness. The gap between her and Tang Zheng was growing larger and larger. It was as if there was a chasm that was difficult to cross. She could not guess what level Tang Zheng's cultivation had reached. Seeing how meticulous he was with Wu, she could not help but think that it would be great if he was in Wu's position. Tang Zheng carried Wu Tsang by the waist and said solemnly, "Let's go." Together, they walked out of the sword forest. The messy sword forest was especially eye-catching in this quiet village. When they walked out of the sword forest, a black mass of people surrounded them from all directions. Where did these people come from? Li Xiaotian sighed and explained, "There are a lot of people in the Imperial Advisor's mansion, so they must have received the orders of the Imperial Advisor to hide and not come out. Now that you have destroyed their sword forest, of course they will rush out and fight you to the death." Fight to the death? Humph, I think it's more like courting death. Tang Zheng was not afraid at all. His cultivation had increased by 2 levels. In addition, after comprehending the heaven-flying immortal sword technique, his confidence had increased greatly. Chapter 688. Walala! War Spirit's blade left a long trail on the ground as sparks flew everywhere. Tang Zheng took large strides and rushed out of the crowd to kill. At the front of the crowd, a familiar figure jumped into his eyes. Junko. She had actually appeared again. Moreover, she was obviously the core of this group of people. Her expression was ashen, and she was like a female leopard that had gone berserk. She roared sternly, "These people destroyed our sword forest. Kill. Use their blood as a sacrifice to the sword forest. Kill." Deafening battle cries rang out from the crowd. Tang Zheng's eyebrows rose high as War Spirit's blade glowed with light, especially those mottled spots. They were like bright stars in the sky, shining brightly and emitting sword chi that made people's heart palpitate. But the Imperial Tutor's people's eyes were red as they charged forward without caring about anything else. Puff, puff, puff. War Spirit's blade was raised high, bringing with it a stream of scarlet blood. Some people screamed as they fell to the ground. Like an infectious disease, more and more people fell to the ground. Wherever Tang Zheng passed, no one could stand. At this moment, he was at his peak state. Fasting grade 9, complete, heaven sword and flying immortal sword technique. It was simply a match made in heaven. When they worked together, the explosive killing power made people's jaws drop. Junko was pushed to the back of the crowd. The hatred in her eyes was gradually replaced by shock. How did he become so powerful? Junko could not find the answer. She could only see her sect members fall one by one. suddenly as if she had gone crazy. She screamed hysterically, "Retreat, retreat!" The crowd retreated like a tide. How could Tang Zheng let go of this opportunity to chase after them? War Spirit's blade flashed as he charged towards these people. "Seal!" Junko shouted in Island Nation's language. Immediately, everyone gave up resisting and formed seals with both hands. In an instant, a mysterious aura filled the air. Tang Zheng's expression turned cold as he looked up at the sky. He saw that the enemies were all raising their hands in the air. Then, a little light gathered above their heads. Finally, a sword was formed. They actually used ninjutsu and hand seals to condense a sword. The light of this sword was not bright, but there was no doubt that the lethality it contained was not to be underestimated. "Kill!" Everyone shouted in unison. The ground shook, and the surrounding houses collapsed. The stream splashed several meters high, and even the soil on the ground floated up. Tang Zheng stopped in his tracks, pointed his right hand forward, and shouted, "Heaven flying immortal!" Shwa! The war soul sword flew into the air and turned into a sword light. At the same time, the virtual sword above everyone's head also shot out, welcoming the war soul sword. Boom! With a single glance, everyone was dumbstruck. The paradise-like village had already disappeared, and in its place was ruins. It was a complete mess. On the ground, there were many disciples of the imperial advisor's manor, and those who could stand could be counted on one hand. Just now, they had fought against Tang Zheng with the strength of a group, but they did not gain the slightest advantage. Everyone looked at Tang Zheng in shock. They had never thought that such a young person would be able to cultivate to such a godly level. Li Xiaotian was hugging Wu at the side, in a daze. His eyes were lifeless, his brain had already shut down, and he had lost the ability to think. 1 against 100, the courage of 1,000 soldiers, nothing more than this. Everyone's eyes were once again focused on Tang Zheng and the imperial advisor. Hearing the conversation between the two, Li Xiaotian's heart could not help but tighten. He wanted to say something to dissuade them, but he swallowed his words back. At this moment, her words to Tang Zheng was simply a passing wind, and Tang Zheng would not pay attention to it. Imperial advisor. Island nation people saw the imperial advisor and respectfully saluted. Even those who were lying on the ground struggled to get up. The imperial advisor looked at them indifferently and said, "Stand down." Everyone hesitated for a moment, but they did not dare to disobey his order. They supported the injured disciples and retreated to the side. Junko's face was full of shame. She lowered her head and retreated to the side. The imperial advisor looked at this group of defeated soldiers without a trace of pity. His eyes were as calm as an ancient well. Just now, he let these people rush forward. He knew that there would be many casualties, but the final result was still beyond his expectations. He originally hoped that with so many people working together, they could at least seriously injure Tang Zheng, but he did not expect that he would not even spit out a mouthful of blood. One must know that when he was hiding in the dark, he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. This move, heaven flying immortal, was deeply imprinted in the depths of his soul. Even if he died, he would not forget it, especially when he saw this move for the second time. His soul had a kind of feeling of trembling. This sword was too powerful. The brilliant heavenly might was nothing more than this. Immediately, this made him even more determined to capture Tang Zheng alive. Only by pulling out all the things in his head could he make up for his loss. Otherwise, even if he killed Tang Zheng, his loss would not be recovered. The imperial advisor tidied up his bad mood, glanced at Tang Zheng, and rushed out like a whirlwind, and said, "If you want to save people, then follow me." His voice fell. he had already rushed out more than 100 meters, running straight into the depths of the village. Tang Zheng took Marshall from Li Xiaotian's hand and chased after him without saying a word. Li Xiaotian hesitated for a moment and followed closely behind. Immediately, the imperial advisor was in front, Tang Zheng and Li Xiaotian were behind. Xiao Bai stood on his shoulder, and Gui Qiansui went back into his backpack. One in front, one behind, as fast as lightning. As Tang Zheng locked onto the imperial tutor's figure, he lowered his head to look at Marshall, who was in his embrace. Her face was already devoid of blood, and she had completely fallen into a coma, but the occasional throbbing between her brows still showed the pain he was enduring. He carefully controlled his true qi to enter Marshall's body, and soon the scene around her heart clearly appeared in his mind. The black goo worm had completely awakened and broke out of its shell like a squid. It had countless tentacles firmly wrapped around Marshall's heart. The goo worm was no longer black, but had turned blood red, as if it had sucked the heart's blood. The heart's heartbeat had become very weak, as if it could stop at any time. As if sensing the threat of his true qi, the goo worm's tentacles suddenly contracted, tightly wrapping around the heart. Marshall immediately let out a cry of pain, and actually woke up, but the intense pain in her eyes made Tang Zheng feel as if a knife was being twisted. Where are we going? Marshall asked weakly. We are saving people. Marshall's eyes immediately showed a trace of joy and said, You found them? Not yet, but I will definitely find them. I promise you. Tang Zheng said resolutely. Marshall's mouth twitched, and she squeezed out a smile. I believe you. You must save them. Before she finished speaking, her head tilted, and she fainted again. Marshall, Marshall! Tang Zheng shouted loudly, but there was no response. Li Xiaotian looked at him from the side and wanted to say something, but hesitated and finally clenched his teeth and said, Her poison is already very serious. The meaning behind his words seemed to be that he wanted Tang Zheng to give up. Tang Zheng suddenly raised her head and glared fiercely at Li Xiaotian. Her neck suddenly shrunk as she felt the fear of a sword cutting across her neck. Until the last moment, I will never give up. This is what I promised her. Tang Zheng said word by word. The corner of Li Xiaotian's mouth twitched, and he said hesitantly, She's so lucky to have met you. While they were talking, the group had already left the village far behind them, crossed a mountain, and finally arrived in front of a huge lake. Chapter 689. The imperial advisor stopped in front of the lake and looked at the beautiful and quiet lake. A mysterious smile appeared on his face, and a deep sense of reverence appeared between his brows. Imperial advisor, there is no path ahead. Where else do you want to lead us? Tang Zheng asked in a deep voice. The imperial advisor turned his head to look at him and said, Who said there's no path? He stepped on the waves and walked towards the center of the lake. With his cultivation, he could already cross the river on a reed. With a light tap of his foot on the surface of the lake, ripples appeared on the surface of the lake as he quickly walked towards the center of the lake. What is he going to do? Li Xiaotian asked. Tang Zheng shook his head. He could not guess what the other party was thinking. Take good care of Marshall. Tang Zheng handed Marshall over to Li Xiaotian. Even if there really is some scheme, I have no way out. Li Xiaotian hugged Marshall and looked straight at him. She wanted to say something but hesitated. Take care of yourself. Tang Zheng looked at her deeply, then looked at Marshall gently. With a leap, he jumped onto the surface of the lake. The soles of his shoes sank into the lake, but he did not completely fall into the water. However, compared to the imperial advisor's leisurely stroll, it was clearly much more difficult for him to walk. Seeing that he had also arrived at the center of the lake, the imperial advisor gave him a strange smile and shouted, Open! Crack! As if something had been touched, cracking sounds could be heard from the bottom of the lake. The surface of the lake began to fluctuate violently, and in an instant, a huge whirlpool appeared on the surface of the lake. The imperial advisor stood by the side of the whirlpool. No matter how powerful the whirlpool was, it was unable to shake him in the slightest. Tang Zheng felt the vibration coming from beneath his feet and was surprised. What was the other party trying to do? Before he could understand, the whirlpool grew bigger and bigger, and a black hole appeared in front of him. The lake water flowed down the edge of the black hole like a huge waterfall. The black hole was incomparably dark, without a single ray of light. It was impossible to see what was below, and a formless fear struck his heart. If you want to save him, then follow me. After the state preceptor finished speaking, he jumped into the black hole. Tang Zheng stretched his neck and found that the imperial tutor's figure had been swallowed by the black hole. He turned his head to look at Li Xiaotian and Marshall, who were on the shore. Li Xiaotian looked at him with burning eyes, revealing a faint concern between his brows. He suddenly turned his head and touched Xiao Bai on his shoulder, saying, "Xiao Bai, let's go and see what's strange down there." Xiao Bai nodded heavily, his small eyes filled with a dignified expression. Whoosh! Since that was the case, then he had to guard against the state preceptor's big move, a big move that could make him surrender. Ding dong! A crisp sound startled Tang Zheng. He tripped over something hard. What the hell is this? He quickly used the true fire to illuminate the area. His breathing could not help but tighten, and he subconsciously took a step back. A skull. A terrifying skull was placed on the ground. There were still traces of blood on it, as if it had not completely dried up. Tang Zheng felt a chill run from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. Although he was not afraid of this, why would there be a skull here? And it looked relatively fresh, as if it had just died not long ago. Suddenly, he realized something, his eyes widened, and he exclaimed, "Could it be theirs?" Wu Junshan and the others were imprisoned. Could this be one of their heads? Once this thought drilled into his mind, it could not be dismissed. He could not help but fall into deep worry. What if it was Lan Yu's? What if it was Wu Junshan's? At this moment, he gradually understood that he did not know when, but he had actually become very concerned about their safety. It was the kind of concern that came from the bottom of his heart, unknowingly and imperceptibly formed. Did he not always have a good impression of the two? How did it become like this? He shook his head hard, but he could not figure it out. In the end, he attributed all of this to the blood relationship, where blood was thicker than water. Although he had always been avoiding this kind of blood relationship, the feelings in the depths of his heart had unknowingly changed. In fact, when he was very young, he looked forward to this kind of relationship very much. Seeing that other children had parents who doted on them while he only had a grandfather, he had also fantasized that his parents would come to his side and give him endless love. In the end, none of this came true, so he buried this extravagant hope in the bottom of his heart. Ever since Lan Yu and Wu Junshan appeared, although he firmly rejected them, unknowingly, the hope buried in the depths of his heart had begun to sprout again, and it had unknowingly grown. At this moment, when he realized that the two of them might really have left him, they were separated by life and death. He could not help but feel a sense of fear. No. Suddenly, he screamed and rushed out like a madman. The wind became colder, as if it came from the underworld. Moreover, traces of the smell of blood were also blown by the cold wind, causing one's nerves to involuntarily tighten. Suddenly, the scene in front of him opened up. He had arrived in a huge rock cave, and many stalactites were hanging upside down above his head like sharp swords. Behind the stalactites was an underground river, and the water surged, creating white splashes. The river kept flowing forward, and it was unknown where it flowed. Chapter 690. Tang Zheng did not pay attention to the state teacher's sarcasm. Instead, he raised his head and stared at the stalactites. He could vaguely see that the people inside had their eyes closed, indicating that they had already fainted. Who hung them up there? What was the thing that wrapped them up? What was the point of not killing them, but hanging them up like specimens? Questions came one after another, and Tang Zheng could not figure them out at all. Look, you will also become one of them in a while, the state teacher said proudly. Do the bones on the ground belong to some of them? Tang Zheng pointed at the bones on the ground and asked with an ashen face. Of course, who else is here besides them? The state teacher did not hide anything and admitted it openly. You killed people. Do you still want to humiliate them like this? You even deliberately peeled off the bones. You really are a group of animals, beasts. Tang Zheng was extremely angry. Tang Zheng had also killed enemies before, but after killing them, he would never humiliate the bones of the other party. However, the other party actually pulled out the tendons and skinned them, and even casually threw away these bones. This was already an extremely perverted behavior. Others said that the island nation people were perverted, but who would have thought that it was true? Even the state teacher, a dignified master of a generation, would do such a beastly act. Plus two, the state teacher did not make a sound. Instead, he sneered proudly. You can curse, but in a while, you won't be able to curse anymore. I will pull out all the things in your head. In the future, when I succeed, I will set foot on the land of Huaxia. The unfinished wishes of the ancestors, I will complete them. I will let the sun flag be planted in every corner of Huaxia, every inch of land. Ha! All of this is thanks to you. I really have to properly thank you. The madness on the state teacher's face became more and more intense, and the words he said became more and more crazy. He actually had such a wild ambition. Arrogant. Dream on. Not only will I destroy your imperial advisor's residence, I will also go to the imperial palace and completely destroy the spiritual pillar of your island nation. And that sick ghost emperor, last time, it was a substitute that died in his place. This time, I want his real body to be completely finished. I will burn his bones and scatter his ashes, and he will never be reincarnated. Tang Zheng frowned and glared. He was so angry that his whole body was about to be ignited. He had never cursed someone so viciously before, and had never thought of doing things so ruthlessly. But this time, he really wanted to kill the other party from the bottom of his heart. There were too many scourges in this race, and these scourges had to be completely wiped out. That way, they would be able to prevent them from doing crazy things, and prevent them from continuing to covet the magnificent Huaxia. The imperial teacher said with disdain, In your dreams, I finished speaking. Next, your misfortune will truly descend. You can't kill me. Don't tell me you want to find your helper? Although Tang Zheng said it casually, he was already on guard against the other party's possible attack. The imperial teacher smiled mysteriously and cut his palm with his finger. Blood immediately flowed out from his palm and dripped to the ground. Tang Zheng frowned. What was he doing? The blood fell on the high platform under the state teacher's feet. Traces of red light rose from the high platform and illuminated the surroundings. The smell of blood in the air immediately became stronger. The cold wind blew, and the river water churned violently as if it was boiling. Tang Zheng's expression changed slightly as he exclaimed, What's going on? Ha ha! Tang Zheng, surrender obediently, and you will suffer less. Otherwise, it will be too late for you to regret it. The state teacher's voice became ethereal and passed through the strong wind. Tang Zheng subconsciously took 3 steps back. He could clearly feel the danger. Using blood as a guide, what was the state teacher summoning? Tang Zheng could not help but remember the military training experience outside the northwestern border town. The demons also used human blood as a guide. Furthermore, they used a large amount of human blood as a guide to set up a formation and brought back the demon god from the outland. The state teacher was doing the same. Was he also trying to summon something from the outland? No, this was an island nation. It had nothing to do with the outland. Then why was he doing this? Before Tang Zheng could figure out the relationship between them, a wet thing suddenly fell on top of his head. He subconsciously raised his head to look. Suddenly, his heart almost jumped out of his throat. A bloody mouth stopped right on top of his head. The pair of long fangs were terrifying. Demonic beast. This thought immediately appeared in his mind. At the same time, his body had already made the corresponding move. He tapped the tip of his foot and quickly slid backward, trying to avoid this ferocious fellow. Without a doubt, the state teacher used blood as a guide to summon this monster. He did not expect that there would be demonic beasts in the island nation. The ninjutsu of the island nation was only the tip of the iceberg of Huaxia. Its development was far behind Huaxia. At that time, Huaxia was the Celestial Empire. Island nation was equivalent to a primitive society. However, he had never heard of a demonic beast in an island nation. Demonic beasts did not appear casually. At that time, there were no demonic beasts in the Western and Eastern world. Only in Huaxia would there be demonic beasts. That was because Huaxia was the center of the world. The spiritual energy was the most abundant, and cultivation would be faster there. Which demonic beast would be stupid enough to go to a place with thin spiritual energy? Wouldn't that be going against themselves? Therefore, Tang Zheng was so surprised to see a demonic beast here. Moreover, this demonic beast's cultivation was obviously not low. Squeak, squeak. Xiao Bai stared at the other party and let out a sharp cry. Xiao Bai used to be arrogant when facing the thundercloud beast and even the five-clawed golden dragon. But now, after a series of fierce battles and being injured, his momentum involuntarily weakened a lot. Hearing Xiao Bai's cry, the demonic beast's lantern-like eyes immediately showed suspicion. It was slightly startled, but it did not retreat. Instead, it moved closer. Tang Zheng's heart tightened. This was troublesome. Since the other party was not afraid of Xiao Bai, it meant that the other party's cultivation was really not ordinary. No wonder the state teacher was fearless. It turned out that he had such a helper. Tang Zheng immediately realized why Wu Junshan and the others were imprisoned here. Because in front of this level of demonic beast, Wu Junshan and the others were obviously powerless. When the state teacher saw the demonic beast, his eyes flashed with awe. If Junko was here, perhaps she would understand the state teacher's words. Even if he wanted to release Wu Junshan and the others, it was impossible to do so, because Wu Junshan and the others had already fallen into the hands of this demonic beast. The state teacher was powerless. Moreover, the state teacher could not really control this demonic beast, which could be seen from the awe in his eyes. Tang Zheng, you have no way out. Resistance is futile. Master Orochi, please restrain him. He has many Chinese spells in his head. The state preceptor urged excitedly. Huaxia God, what the hell is that? Why have I never heard of it? Tang Zheng thought. No one answered his question, because that pair of huge eyes had already burst out a terrifying light, and a pair of fangs directly bit towards Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng continued to retreat. Suddenly, Xiao Bai screamed loudly. Tang Zheng was shocked and felt a strong wind behind him. Damn it! He slashed backwards with his sword, but missed. He quickly turned his head to look. Damn! Tang Zheng could not help but curse. Behind him was actually a huge head with lantern-sized eyes and long fangs, and droplets of saliva dripped down from the fangs. Why are there two demonic beasts? Tang Zheng felt a headache. Just one demonic beast was enough to make him suffer. Two demonic beasts. Wouldn't that be asking for his life? But he did not have time to sigh, and quickly moved to the left. Bang! He bumped into something hard and elastic, which bounced him back immediately. He looked carefully. Damn! It was another huge head that looked exactly the same. In the darkness, he could not see what he crashed into, but it was definitely the body of this demonic beast. 3 demonic beasts. How could this damn island nation have so many demonic beasts? Was this a zoo? Tang Zheng felt bitter in his mouth, but before he could digest all of this, a few lantern-sized eyes lit up in the darkness. Lantern-like eyes floated above their heads, and there were the same fangs. In the end, there were actually 8 heads. 8 demonic beasts. Tang Zheng really felt like his heart had died. There were actually so many demonic beasts, and each of them was very powerful. How could Tang Zheng deal with them? Xiao Bai's eyes also changed. It was not afraid of anything, but its small eyes revealed a rare look of worry. Ha ha, Tang Zheng, now you've given up? The state preceptor stood on the high platform, arrogant and proud as he asked. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth and said, "You relied on these demonic beasts to catch them, right? Humph, you're smart. Don't think that you're the only one with divine beasts. Our island nation also has divine beasts, and they're much more powerful than your little one." The state preceptor obviously did not admit that they were demonic beasts, but classified these beasts as divine beasts. Tang Zheng snorted. Demonic beasts are demonic beasts. Where did divine beasts come from? Far-fetched, sticking gold on your face. Don't you feel ashamed? If they really talked about divine beasts, perhaps only the 5-clawed golden dragon could be called divine beasts. As for Xiao Bai, even the 5-clawed golden dragon could not figure out its origin, so Tang Zheng did not know whether it was a demonic beast or a divine beast. The state preceptor's face flushed red, and he angrily said, "You dare to be rude to God, Orochi, Tang Zheng, in a moment you will beg for death." Humph, so the so-called state preceptor's biggest reliance is not you, but these demonic beasts. The world has really been deceived by you. As long as you stay, the world will still not know this secret. In the future, when I set foot on the land of Huaxia, the world will see the divine power of Orochi. The state preceptor's eyes shone as he said with yearning. In an instant, the entire cave was filled with rustling sounds, and the waves in the river grew bigger and bigger, as if many things were quietly moving. Tang Zheng's heart tightened, and he was on full alert. Not long after, a huge monster completely appeared from the darkness, almost filling the entire cave. Tang Zheng's eyes gradually widened into circles as he looked at everything in front of him in disbelief. There was only one word in his mind: ferocious. The scene in front of him was too ferocious. If a timid person saw it, they would probably be scared to death. Tang Zheng was experienced and knowledgeable, but he was also deeply shocked. It turned out that his previous understanding was all wrong. The other party was not an 8-headed demonic beast, but a single demonic beast. However, it had 8 heads and 8 tails. This strange combination looked ugly and ferocious. Its entire body was black, covered with scales the size of a face, suffused with a black light. Just now, Tang Zheng's War Soul sword was unable to break through the scales, so one could imagine how strong its defense was. It gave people another impression that it was big. It was too big, so big that it almost filled the entire space, but there was still a part of it hidden in the darkness and the river. This was its real body, which made people tremble with fear. Tang Zheng had even seen the 5-clawed golden dragon, but the 5-clawed golden dragon gave people a feeling of heaven's might. But this demonic beast, in addition to being ferocious, was cold, making people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. It was a completely different feeling. Immortal! This looks like the legendary Yamada no Orochi. Gue Chiensue's small head suddenly came out of the backpack, looking at everything in front of him, and thoughtfully said, Yamada no Orochi? What's its origin? Tang Zheng heard that the state preceptor just called the demonic beast as Yamada no Orochi. He was afraid that Yamada no Orochi was its real name. Yamada no Orochi is a very ferocious demonic beast. Its body is a flood dragon, and it especially likes to eat people. Every time it eats 10,000 people, it will grow one more head and one more tail. Therefore, its strength will also increase by leaps and bounds. In order to pursue higher cultivation and strength, it ate people everywhere. Finally, it grew 8 heads and 8 tails. Legend has it that as long as it grows 9 heads and 9 tails, it can enter the dragon gate and transform into a 9-clawed golden dragon. Gui Qiansui said tirelessly. Only the 5-clawed golden dragon was imprisoned in the imperial city, but Yamada no Orochi could transform into a 9-clawed golden dragon. As the name suggests, it must be many times more powerful than the 5-clawed golden dragon. What? It ate tens of thousands of people and killed so many people, and it can still transform into a dragon. All of this was thanks to the powerful cultivator from back then. If he knew who this person was, then Tang Zheng would definitely thank him. However, I feel that its strength is still very strong. According to the legend, its strength should not be so strong. Gui Qiansui said with some doubts. Tang Zheng had an idea and said, You mean it has recovered its strength? Yes, and it has recovered a lot. Did it eat a lot of people again? Tang Zheng felt a chill in his bones. Gui Qiansui hesitated and said, It's possible. Tang Zheng turned his head and stared at Orochi. He felt more and more disgusted. He did not know how many people were buried in its stomach. The conversation between the two was heard by Orochi and the state preceptor. Orochi twisted its huge body and looked at Gui Qiansui covetously and said, You have heard of my deeds, not simple. Humph, but you know it too late. Now I have recovered half of my strength, and there are no powerful cultivators in this world. So no one can stop me. I want to eat more people. Moreover, I found that martial artists and cultivators are the most delicious and can increase my strength the most. Therefore, I will eat all the martial artists and cultivators in the world who don't listen to my orders. That way, my strength will recover faster. Orochi's 8 big heads were raised high, ferocious, and crazy. Tang Zheng trembled in fear when he heard this. He glanced at the imperial preceptor from afar and said with disdain, Imperial preceptor, you are really crazy. You are using your own people to feed this evil beast and help it recover its strength. You are helping the tyrant. There will be a day when you will suffer the consequences of your own actions. The state preceptor laughed crazily. Who said I use my own people to feed Orochi? I will not be so stupid. Tang Zheng's face changed slightly. Then where did you find so many people? Oh, of course, it is Huaxia people. There are so many Huaxia people. Isn't it a small matter to sacrifice tens of thousands of people? Hasn't your country always wanted to control the population? I am doing you a big favor. The state preceptor said ferociously. You are crazy. Tang Zheng was furious. The state preceptor wanted to kill Huaxia people, and it seemed that many Huaxia people had been buried in Orochi's stomach. No, Tang Zheng suddenly realized a problem. If so many Huaxia people disappeared for no reason, there must be some news. Orochi shook his head and wagged his tail. I don't need you to command me. I will capture him alive and take all the knowledge in his head for my own use. The state preceptor nodded enviously and did not dare to say more. He retreated to the side and left the battlefield to Orochi. Orochi slithered, and his huge body had already surrounded Tang Zheng from all directions. Tang Zheng was like a sandwich biscuit, surrounded in the center. Tang Zheng clenched his teeth as he understood that this was a battle to the death. If he were to live, he would be able to expose Japan's conspiracy to the public. If he were to die, then perhaps China would really face a huge disaster. Therefore, he must fight with all his strength. Bah! He spat a mouthful of saliva and rubbed his palms. He touched Whitey on his shoulder and Gue Qiansui in his backpack and said, "This is a life-and-death battle. We can only fight to the death." Xiao Bai nodded heavily and squeaked in response to Tang Zheng's mobilization. Gue Qiansui jumped out of the backpack and landed on the ground. He said, "Immortal, you will be invincible. We can definitely leave here safely." Tang Zheng nodded and said to Xiao Bai on his shoulder in a low voice, "Xiao Bai, I will hold off Orochi, and you go and save the hanging people." Xiao Bai seemed to understand and nodded. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and took the lead to take a step forward. He rushed up with War Soul in his hand and shouted, "Kill!" Whoosh! When Transcendent Flying Immortal was used, a series of exquisite sword moves immediately greeted Yamada no Orochi. Yamada no Orochi blinked contemptuously, and its huge body began to move. This space was too narrow, and it could not fully exert its advantage of being a huge monster. Its fighting power was limited a lot. Tang Zheng relied on his nimble movements to engage in a fierce battle with it. He was like a dancing butterfly, shuttling between the fangs of Yamada no Orochi and its huge tail. He was surrounded by danger. The War Soul sword slashed at the scales of the Yamada no Orochi, creating sparks. It was like a dazzling firework, illuminating this narrow space more and more. The darkness was dispelled, and Orochi's body was revealed. Tang Zheng's heart was beating like a drum. If there was enough space to display its full strength, it would be hundreds of meters long, which was a bit bigger than the Thundercloud Beast's body. Such a huge body had been hiding in this small space. No one knew if it felt aggrieved. Tang Zheng held back Yamada no Orochi. Even though his cultivation was much weaker, he had learned too many things. As long as he was not surrounded by danger, he would often have many tricks up his sleeve to turn danger into safety. At this moment, he was no longer limited to the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. Although the heaven-flying immortal sword technique could make him flustered against the Imperial Advisor, it might not be useful against Orochi. Therefore, the wind-chasing sword technique, heaven-shocking bow, and sun-shooting arrow were all used by Tang Zheng at the right time. Weapons and martial arts were used interchangeably, causing people to be dazzled and Orochi to go crazy. "You are so young, yet you know so many spells and so many powerful treasures. Who taught you this anomaly?" Orochi asked angrily. Tang Zheng coldly snorted and said, Your grandfather, am a self-taught genius. You're courting death." After being scolded, Orochi flew into a rage, and its attacks suddenly became even sharper. Tang Zheng's situation was no longer optimistic. Boom! A huge tail swept over fiercely. Tang Zheng already had no way to retreat, and even the War Soul sword was unable to hastily fight back. Tang Zheng immediately activated the 9 Revolutions Vajra technique. His entire body was like steel, preparing to take this attack head-on. "Immortal, let me do it!" It was unknown when Gue Qiansui arrived in front of Tang Zheng, but it suddenly became bigger, like a huge shield blocking in front of Tang Zheng. Bang! The huge tail swept across the turtle's shell, producing a loud, muffled sound. Tang Zheng could clearly see the pain in Gue Qiansui's eyes, and his heart tightened. Previously, when the imperial tutor's broken sword slashed on its turtle shell, it did not feel so much pain. It could be imagined that Orochi's attack was much stronger than the imperial tutor's attack. Gue Qiansui endured this attack without moving an inch, afraid that it would hurt Tang Zheng. Ever since Gue Qiansui followed Tang Zheng, not only did Tang Zheng give him cultivation techniques, he also took care of him, but he did not report too much to Tang Zheng. In this life and death situation, he naturally had to stand up and fight for Tang Zheng. He knew how powerful Orochi was, but he still did not retreat, which showed his intention. Tang Zheng also saw Gue Qiansui's intention from this action. At that time, it was a coincidence that he took Gue Qiansui in. Perhaps, deep in his heart, he still had a grudge against Gue Qiansui's actions. But when Yamada no Orochi's attack landed on Gue Qiansui's body, the grudge in Tang Zheng's heart was immediately shattered into pieces, and there was nothing left. A little turtle wants to be a hero, blocking my way. You're courting death. Orochi's anger was strong, and he did not hide his contempt for Gue Qiansui. Bang! Another huge tail swept Gue Qiansui, and the pain in Gue Qiansui's eyes became more intense, and he staggered forward. His cultivation was much lower than Orochi's. If he did not rely on his race's natural defense advantage, he would not be Orochi's opponent at all. But even so, it was a little overwhelmed after taking 2 hits head-on. Seeing this, Tang Zheng shouted, "Gue Qiansui, I'll do it!" Like a whirlwind, he bypassed Gue Qiansui and went to meet the huge tail, and the War Soul Sword had been slashed out. However, that giant tail was just a feint. On the other side, another giant tail quietly appeared. Tang Zheng did not have time to defend, and only heard a muffled sound as the sky and earth spun. He saw stars, and his throat felt sweet as he spat out a mouthful of blood. "You overestimate yourself," Orochi said disdainfully. While Tang Zheng was still in the air, 2 huge tails flew in the air and rolled him with lightning speed. Crack! Crack! With a crisp sound of bones, Tang Zheng spat out a big mouthful of blood. He really felt that his bones were about to be crushed by the huge twisting force. He quickly ran the 9 transformation Vajra tactics, which offset the twisting force, but he had been rolled up and could not move at all. Was he going to be captured like this? At the same time, Xiao Bai had quietly jumped on the roof and came to the stalactites. The small mouth took a few deep breaths and suddenly spat out a huge flame. Whoosh! The amber-like surface melted immediately, and a series of falling sounds were heard. One by one, the pieces of meat fell to the ground, and the amber on the surface was immediately shattered. One by one, they woke up. In an instant, dozens of people stood up. Although they were a little embarrassed, they were like peerless divine soldiers, full of endless fighting spirit. Everyone's eyes were burning with rage. Although they were imprisoned and couldn't move, their consciousness hadn't disappeared. Every day, they were immersed in endless pain. It was not the pain of facing death, but the pain of watching their companions die in the mouth of Orochi. They could not do anything, and this feeling almost made them collapse. Of course, the conspiracy of Orochi and the island nation made them even angrier. It turned out that there were so many conspiracies hidden in the war decades ago. Martial arts sect also participated in that war, and many people were sacrificed, so that feeling was even more empathetic. Chapter 693. With so many people suddenly regaining their freedom, the killing intent they emitted caused one's heart to sway. The Imperial Grandmaster's heart couldn't help but jump a few times, but when he saw the Yamada no Orochi, his worries immediately disappeared. With the Yamada no Orochi here, all enemies were paper tigers that couldn't withstand a single blow. Lan Yu saw Tang Zheng, who was tangled in a ball by the giant tail, and her beautiful eyes immediately turned red. She was as cold as a knife as she shouted, "Let him go!" Before she finished speaking, she had already rushed out like an arrow. Like a willow catkin, she lightly landed on Yamada no Orochi's body. She kicked off the pitch-black scales with the tips of her feet and flew up. A slender hand reached out, and 2 fingers grabbed onto a protruding piece of the scale as if they were picking a flower. Break! An earth-shattering word came out of Lan Yu's mouth. Her fingers immediately brought about a bloody light, and the scale armor was actually removed by her. Roar! A roar mixed with pain came from the bloody mouth, and the giant tail that was wrapping around Tang Zheng couldn't help but loosen a little. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up, and he jumped out. The war soul sword immediately slashed out a ray of fire on the scale armor, and with the help of the rebound, he landed on the ground far away. Looking up, he saw that the slim figure was still standing on the huge body, holding the huge black scale armor. She stood proudly and glared at the Yamada no Orochi. "I'm going to eat you." The Yamada no Orochi shook its head and bit towards Lan Yu with its bloody mouth. Lan Yu did not move. She waved her hand forward, and the scale armor between her fingers flew out with a whoosh. Like a black bolt of lightning, it shot towards the bloody mouth. Ka-cha! The scale armor accurately hit a fong that was shining with a cold light. With a crisp sound, the fong was broken into 2. Roar! Another, even more miserable cry rang out. It shook the heavens and the earth, causing the rocks on the ceiling to fall down. 5 giant tails swept towards Lan Yu at the same time. Whiz! Lan Yu retreated lightly, but the giant tail followed her like a shadow. Its speed was even faster than Lan Yu's, and it caught up with her in an instant. Lan Yu's expression changed slightly. She clenched her teeth and prepared to turn around to face the enemy. However, as she was in midair, her attack power was inevitably greatly reduced. Right at this moment, a pair of large hands appeared behind her. The palms flipped and drew 9 circles. In an instant, an endless stream of energy gushed out from the circles, blocking the giant tails. When Lan Yu saw the man beside her, she couldn't help but feel relieved. Of course, this was Wu Junshan. His yin-yang harmony art had already been cultivated to perfection. His ability to use softness to overcome hardness and weakness to overcome strength could be said to have reached perfection. Bang! There was a shocking sound of impact, and the shock waves spread in all directions. Stones kept falling from the walls. Go! Wu Junshan pulled his wife's hand and quickly retreated, avoiding Orochi's attack range. The Imperial Preceptor looked at this scene with a gloomy expression. He was greatly shocked. In his mind, Orochi was a lofty and inviolable existence. However, these people had actually injured it. Moreover, Lan Yu's elegant posture and Wu Junshan's unfathomable yin-yang harmony art made the Imperial Preceptor feel a chill run down his spine. Only now did he truly experience the strength of the warriors in Huaxia. Moreover, it wasn't the strength of a single person, but the strength of many. This was a kind of accumulation, and it was impossible for a newly risen island nation to have such accumulation. The Imperial Preceptor often thought that if the island nation had a few powerhouses like him, they could start another war and set foot on the rich land of Huaxia even without the help of Orochi's divine power. But now, it seemed that his idea was absurd and laughable. Even if there were a few Grandmaster stage powerhouses like him, if they stepped into Huaxia, they would only be able to enter vertically and come out horizontally. At this moment, he couldn't help but rejoice that the island nation had the protection of Orochi. This was the blessing of the heavens for the island nation. Otherwise, if the island nation wanted to rise, it would be a fool's dream. He looked at these dozens of experts, and his eyes had already turned as cold as snow. He muttered to himself, What's the use of you escaping? You're still going to be a delicious meal in Orochi's stomach. Humph. Thus, he looked down from above, ready to enjoy the moving scene of Orochi eating them one by one. Orochi raised its head high, and its 8 heads looked down at the crowd from above. Only 15 of its 16 lantern-sized eyeballs were left. The blood from the eyeballs that had been blinded by the War Soul Sword had already stopped, but they had turned blood red and lost their light. There were only 15 of its long fangs left. The broken fangs were like a huge mockery, silently mocking Orochi's arrogance and conceit. Lan Yu and Tang Zheng, this pair of mother and son, had both given Orochi a heavy blow. Facing the condescending Orochi, everyone subconsciously gathered together. Lan Yu impatiently grabbed onto Tang Zheng's hand, tears flowing down her cheeks. In fact, she was a very strong person deep down in her bones. In terms of martial arts, she was not inferior to her country. However, at this moment, her mother's nature was acting up. Her usual strength collapsed and was shattered by the impact of her tears. After surviving a calamity, Lan Yu's feelings were especially deep. Everyone said excitedly. Tang Zheng's heart moved, and he asked curiously, "How did you get caught here?" "It's all because of this damned Yamada no Orochi. One day, it attacked our island. We didn't expect it to be so powerful. While we were fighting, it suddenly spat out a large amount of poisonous fog. We were careless and inhaled the poisonous fog. We were caught by it and brought here." Lan Yu said indignantly. Tang Zheng suddenly realized that the traces of battle he saw on the island must have been left behind by the Yamada no Orochi when he fought with them. It was just that no one expected the Yamada no Orochi to be able to spit out poisonous mist, which was why so many people were plotted against. Otherwise, with their cultivation, how could they have been annihilated without a sound? Tang Zheng raised his head, looked at the imperial advisor from afar, and said, "Since you have already captured them, why did you send a warship to bombard the island? Why bother?" If it wasn't for the fact that he and Wu coincidentally encountered the warship bombing the island, they probably wouldn't have been able to find them even if they dug 3 feet into the ground. It was even more impossible for them to track them down and save them from the bloody mouth of the Orochi. No one in the world knows of the existence of the Orochi. In order to cover up the whereabouts of the Orochi, we must bomb that island. The imperial advisor said, arrogantly, "Since it was the Li Palace who told you their whereabouts, could it be that the Li Palace doesn't know of the existence of the Orochi?" Tang Zheng asked suspiciously. The imperial advisor laughed complacently. "Of course not. Only the imperial advisor and the heavenly emperor know of the existence of the Orochi. No one else in the world knows of its existence. The Li Palace is thousands of miles away. How could they know? Then why did they tell you this news?" Of course, I can guess 1 or 2 of the Li Palace's thoughts. They saw that the island nation's strength was getting stronger and stronger, so they deliberately used this incident to test our strength. I was just pushing the boat with the current. These people are not ordinary people, but martial artists, and there are even great master martial artists. The effect of eating them is 100 or 1,000 times better than eating ordinary people. It will allow the Orochi's cultivation to recover faster. So you did not hesitate to expose the true strength of the island nation to capture them. Tang Zheng suddenly realized. Chapter 694. Hearing this, Tang Zheng was enlightened. So there was such a secret. Moreover, Li Xiaotian did not tell him the complete truth. This woman was already at the final juncture of life and death, yet she was still hiding things from him. The Li Palace was truly sinister. They actually used the lives of Wu Junshan and the others to test the imperial advisor's residence. They had truly placed a large enough bait. When Wu Junshan and the others heard that they were trapped because of the Li Palace's instigation. They gnashed their teeth in anger. Back then, when the martial sect fell apart, Granny Li was also present. She even supported a few elders, forcing Wu Junshan to leave the martial sect. Thus, they had long regarded the Li Palace and Granny Li as enemies. Now, with the old and new grudges added together, they could not wait to kill their way into the Li Palace and take revenge. Of course, Wu Junshan was also furious, but he controlled himself for the time being. He was rather shocked. The island he had chosen was extremely well hidden, and no one else knew about it. Yet the Li Palace had managed to find their tracks in just a few short months. This intelligence network was absolutely terrifying. Wu Junshan shook his head and muttered, "From what I know of the Li Palace, their intelligence network is limited to within the country. They are not very developed outside of the country. How could even that island not escape their sharp eyes? No, there must be a problem." Plus or minus, suddenly a thought flashed through his mind. His expression became serious. Could this be related to the mysterious power behind Granny Li? Wu Junshan had always guessed that there was an even deeper boss behind Granny Li and the elders. This person had always been behind the scenes, unwilling to show himself. However, to be able to make someone as arrogant as Granny Li submit, this person was definitely not an ordinary person. This person's strength and influence were probably more powerful than Wu Junshan had imagined. Then it was not completely impossible for this person to be able to track their whereabouts. Everything could be explained. Although he had figured it all out, Wu Junshan could not feel happy. This meant that he and his subordinates would have nowhere to hide in the future. In this vast world, there was probably no place for them to hide. Wu Junshan faintly sighed. Lan Yu keenly sensed his low mood and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Wu Junshan calmed himself down and put on a cold face. He said in an unquestionable tone, "You guys go first. I'll cover you, especially since you're injured. Tang Zheng, you can't stay here any longer. This place is too dangerous. Sect Master, we won't leave. We want to fight alongside you." The others said resolutely, as if they were ready to sacrifice themselves for a cause. "This is an order. Are you going to disobey?" Wu Junshan's face darkened as he shouted. Immediately, no one refuted him, but their eyes were filled with reluctance to part with him. However, Tang Zheng stubbornly raised his neck and said indifferently, "I'm not your subordinate. You have no right to order me around." Wu Junshan revealed an awkward expression and said resentfully, "You're injured, don't force yourself." Tang Zheng snorted coldly and declined to comment. Lan Yu grabbed Tang Zheng's hand tightly and said, "Listen to him. We'll bring up the rear. You go first." Tang Zheng looked deeply at her and firmly shook his head. "Haha, you guys are just going back and forth like this. What do you think this place is? You think you can come and go as you please?" The state teacher saw this and mocked. Wu Junshan raised his eyebrows and glanced at the state teacher, like lightning. He said in a deep voice, "There's no need for you to be so noisy. I'll kill you first." Before he finished speaking, he had already launched an attack at the state teacher. The state teacher was shocked. He pointed forward, and the river water soared into the sky, turning into a rain of swords that shot towards Wu Junshan. Wu Junshan drew a circle with his hands, and the rain of swords shrunk inward. In an instant, they were completely trapped by the circle and turned into a ball of water. "Go!" With a shout, Wu Junshan pushed his hands outwards. The ball of water was like a meteor flying from the sky, fiercely smashing towards the state teacher. The state teacher wanted to dodge, but found that he couldn't. Thus, he watched as the water ball grew bigger and bigger in his eyes. Bang! With a loud bang, the ball of water hit his chest. Immediately, his chest quickly caved in, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He was like a kite with a broken string, ruthlessly smashing into the cave wall behind him. All of this happened in a flash. The others only saw a shadow in front of them, and everything was over. Wu Junshan wanted to take advantage of the victory to give the state teacher a fatal blow, but Yamada no Orochi had already reacted. This person actually injured the state teacher in front of its eyes, which was a great insult to it. Thus, with a deafening roar, the 8 heads and tails moved side by side, attacking Wu Junshan and everyone else. None of you can escape. A mouthful of black fog spewed out from the bloody mouth, floating towards everyone. Be careful, it's this poisonous fog. Wu Junshan warned loudly. Everyone hurriedly held their breaths, not inhaling a trace of the poisonous fog. These people were all extraordinary martial artists. Holding their breaths was a small matter. All of a sudden, everyone held their breaths and fought with Yamada no Orochi. It had to be said that although this huge monster's combat power was limited by space, at the same time, the others were also limited by space. In such a narrow space, Yamada no Orochi's attack could reach any area, so no one could escape from its attack alone. Rumble! The earth shook and the mountains shook. The battle was too intense. Yamada no Orochi was fighting against everyone alone, but it was not at a disadvantage at all. Instead, some people fell to the ground due to their lack of strength, injuring their muscles and bones. In the corner, the state teacher struggled to get up, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were blood red, like a poisonous snake staring at its prey. He spat out a mouthful of blood, gritted his teeth, and said in a low voice, "All of you must die. I want all of you to die. None of you are a match for Yamada no Orochi." The black, poisonous fog shrouded the entire space, and the light became dimmer. However, what was worse was that some people had already started coughing. Although everyone could hold their breath for a while, they couldn't do so for long. The air here was completely poisoned, and there was no way to breathe. Without air, they couldn't even maintain their lives, let alone fight. As expected, someone couldn't hold his breath and took a deep breath. Suddenly, the world seemed to be spinning, and he fell to the ground with a thud. The others were in the same situation. Wu Junshan and the others cursed inwardly. If this continued, they would be captured again. If they were really captured, there was no hope of survival. What should they do? Wu Junshan was burning with anxiety, and his moves couldn't help but be a little more disrupted. Yamada no Orochi took advantage of this opportunity and swept his huge tail at Wu Junshan's waist, immediately throwing him far away. He only stopped when he hit the wall. "Sekmaster!" The others turned pale with fright and cried out. Unable to hold his breath, another person fell to the ground. For a moment, the battle became more and more chaotic. The scales of victory immediately tilted, and everyone felt the pressure multiplied. Tang Zheng gritted his teeth, and his cheeks were already red. He thought to himself, "This can't go on. I must find a way to get fresh air." However, the way out was blocked by Yamada no Orochi, so they had no chance to escape. "Upper Immortal, quickly come in here." Suddenly, Gui Qiansui's voice sounded. A huge bubble floated on the ground, and Tang Zheng felt his body become light as he was covered by the bubble. Fresh air. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up, and he took a deep breath. His limbs and bones felt unprecedentedly comfortable. His heart moved, and he immediately remembered that in the South Sea, Gui Qiansui used a bubble to cover everyone, and then they could travel freely in the sea. Tang Zheng patted his head. "Why didn't I think of this trick?" Gui Qiansui, quickly help the others. Tang Zheng quickly shouted, "Yes, Upper Immortal." Gui Qiansui accepted the order and quickly opened his mouth. Bubbles came out from his mouth and wrapped around everyone. Huff, everyone was relieved and took a deep breath. This long-awaited fresh air was too rare. Seeing this, the state master's eyes turned red with envy. Gui Qiansui really had many tricks up his sleeves. He even created such a bubble, which was equivalent to dissolving Yamada no Orochi's poisonous fog. Yamada no Orochi saw that his trump card was ineffective and became angrier. "You little tortoise, how dare you ruin my plan? I will kill you first." Its ferocious mouth immediately bit down. Gui Qiansui was not agile enough and could not escape. He fell directly into Yamada no Orochi's mouth and was bitten by its two fangs. Gui Qiansui saw that the situation was not good and immediately retracted his body into the tortoise shell, leaving only the shell to resist Yamada no Orochi's fangs. "If you were to cultivate for another 1,000 years, perhaps I wouldn't be able to do anything to this damn tortoise shell of yours. However, you're still too inexperienced right now. Break for me." The other head said agitatedly. With a cracking sound, it was as if something had shattered. "Ah!" Gui Qiansui immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream. Tang Zheng's heart tightened. Although Gui Qiansui's tortoise shell was hard, it could not withstand Yamada no Orochi's fangs. He had to save Gui Qiansui and could not watch him die. "Evil beast, I will fight with you." Tang Zheng roared. He pulled the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow. He loosened his fingers, and the shooting sun arrow shot towards that damned head. "Haha, you want to save it? Dream on. I want you to watch it die." Yamada no Orochi proudly laughed as it shook its head and swung its tail. The other head and tail blocked the shooting sun arrow, leaving Tang Zheng with no way to deal with it. Tang Zheng was burning with anxiety. If he delayed any longer, Gui Qiansui would be dead. Seeing this, Wu Junshan, Lan Yu, and the others also rushed out of the bubble at the same time. They held their breath and attacked Yamada no Orochi, trying to save Gui Qiansui from its mouth. Just at this time, Li Xiaoqian's figure appeared at the door. She held Marshall in her arms and shouted, "Be careful, there is an enemy." Enemy. It was not good to stay in this place for long. It was better to leave first. No matter what 100 Change Star-Lord's purpose was, it was not good to fight with him. Otherwise, this small number of people was not enough to fill the gap between his teeth. The crack above their heads was getting bigger and bigger, and they could see the blue sky and white clouds above clearly. But everyone's eyes were immediately attracted by a person floating in the air. It was a delicate child with a picturesque face, like a fairy in a painting. Who else could it be but 100 Change Star-Lord? Tang Zheng and the others had a deep impression of him. Even though he looked harmless, in fact, he was a great devil. If they were not careful, they would die under his evil hands. 100 Faces, Star-Lord stared at the scene in the big hole with his big black eyes. The first thing that attracted his attention was Orochi. He smiled faintly and said, "You are really here, you big snake." Orochi obviously did not know how powerful 100 Change Star-Lord was. He looked up to the sky and hissed, "Where did this little kid come from? I will eat you too." "Oh, he likes to eat people? Hee hee, that's great." 100 Change Star-Lord's eyes lit up. He nodded his little head and said, "Seriously, if ordinary people heard about eating people, they would be scared out of their wits." But 100 Change Star-Lord was very surprised. Demonic beasts should have the nature of demonic beasts. Eating people is good. Huh. Orochi had never heard such words from a human. He could not help but be stunned. He looked at 100 Change Star-Lord suspiciously. "Who exactly are you? Your future master must have a little servant like you. It must be fun." 100 Change Star-Lord said, seriously. He did not seem to be joking. Tang Zheng and the others heard this, and their hearts skipped a beat. It turned out that 100-change Star-Lord was here to subdue Orochi. If he had Orochi, then 100-change Star-Lord's strength would reach a higher level. Perhaps more people would be harmed. Orochi obviously did not expect this answer. After being stunned for a moment, he laughed wildly, but the anger in his laughter was obvious. "Who do you think you are? How dare you say that you can subdue me?" Orochi said angrily and found it funny. Ever since he came to this world, no one had ever dared to say such arrogant words to him. "You have personality. I like it. Alas, I really want to thank the demon god for giving me this information. Otherwise, I wouldn't know that there is a little guy like you in the island nation." 100-change Star-Lord sighed. Such a huge monster was called a little guy. It was ridiculous. However, Tang Zheng and the others knew that 100-change Star-Lord was a figure from the ancient times tens of thousands of years ago. Although he had a pink face, he was already a shrewd old man. It was not an exaggeration to call Orochi a little guy. "What is a demon god?" Yamada no Orochi asked in shock. Its whereabouts were top secret. It thought that only the state preceptor and the emperor knew about it. How could this demon god know about it? 100-change Star-Lord did not seem to intend to attack immediately. He patiently answered Orochi's questions. He said methodically, "The demon god is a member of the demon clan. In order to return to this world, the demon clan sent him to this world. Your information was given to him by the higher-ups of the demon clan. Do you really think that your whereabouts are top secret? The demon clan used to be very powerful. There are not many things in this world that can be hidden from them. Of course, your whereabouts are no exception. It's just that they don't want to disclose it to the public." Orochi's expression changed when he heard this. Of course, he knew how powerful the demon clan was. The demon clan evolved from the Chi-Yu-Jili tribe in ancient times. They had many masters. Even in his heyday, he did not dare to break into the demon clan's base camp. Therefore, he did not doubt 100-change Star-Lord's words. Intuition told him that what 100-change Star-Lord said was true. However, this time, the demon clan asked the demon god to recruit you to strengthen the demon clan's strength and prepare for the arrival of the demon clan's main force. It's a pity that the demon god has been delayed by other things. He gave you to me for free. 100-change Star-Lord added. Everyone finally realized that this was the reason why 100-change Star-Lord appeared here. The demon clan was so insidious that they had prepared such a powerful chess piece. Tang Zheng and the others looked at each other and became very serious. Everyone knew that Orochi's fate in the hands of 100-change Star-Lord was much worse than that of the demon god. 100-change Star-Lord had enough strength to help Orochi recover its strength. That meant that more people would die, and the people would be plunged into misery and suffering. Orochi stared at 100-change Star-Lord with his big round eyes and said angrily, "The demon clan has disappeared from this world. No one in this world can make me surrender. You can't." While Tang Zheng was unable to move, he actually called upon the 4 Symbols Venerables to break his painted ground prison, freeing everyone. After that, he went through a series of fierce battles. In the end, Tang Zheng and the others quietly escaped, which was a great humiliation to him. Moreover, he had seen Tang Zheng some time ago when he attached his divine sense to the demon god. Therefore, with the new and old hatred added together, how could he forget about Tang Zheng? Looking at Tang Zheng from afar, the calm expression on the 100 transformations Star-Lord's face had disappeared, replaced by a murderous aura. "Tang Zheng, stop right there." The 100 transformations Star-Lord shouted from above and pointed at Tang Zheng. A pillar of water rose from the lake and turned into a huge claw grabbing at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng hugged Marshall and turned his head slightly. When he saw the huge claw, he was shocked and prepared to defend. However, one person beat him to it. Wu Junshan stood in front of Tang Zheng to protect him. His hands formed a circle and blocked the huge claw. "You're courting death." The 100 transformations, Star-Lord scolded disdainfully. His small hands immediately clenched into fists. The claw instantly contracted and grabbed Wu Junshan. Wu Junshan's figure disappeared, and the others turned pale with fright and screamed, "Sect Master! Humph! Let's see if you still dare to go against me." The 100 transformations Star-Lord was extremely proud and turned his gaze to Tang Zheng. Suddenly, boom! With an explosion, the claw exploded and turned into water droplets that filled the sky. Wu Junshan stood proudly and stared at the 100 transformations Star-Lord coldly, saying, "You want to kill me just like that? You think too little of me." The 100 transformations Star-Lord was slightly stunned, but immediately became angry and prepared to attack again. At this time, Yamada no Orochi, who had been trapped by the chains, used all his skills. His body that was buried under the ground also rushed out. His huge body was completely compared to the others, like a giant compared to a small dot. With a flash of black light, his huge tail whipped the chains without hesitation. Kacha! The chains exploded one after another, turning into water droplets and falling back into the lake. The 100 transformations, Star-Lord's expression changed slightly. His attention was attracted by Tang Zheng and the others, and Yamada no Orochi took the opportunity to escape. "You want to escape just like that? Humph! How can I let a cooked duck escape?" The 100 transformations, Star-Lord said disdainfully. His upper body slightly leaned forward and swooped down with a whistling sound. The surface of the lake rippled, and the powerful shock wave almost set off waves. "Yamada no Orochi, since you are still stubborn and unwilling to obediently surrender, then I will beat you until you surrender." The 100 transformations, Star-Lord said in a deep voice. Her rosy cheeks became gloomy. Yamada no Orochi raised his head and shook his head. Zhang Yu was helpless and roared, "Dream on!" With a swing of his huge tail, a 100-meter-tall wave rushed down at the 100 transformations Star-Lord. The 100 transformations Star-Lord was calm and immediately launched a counterattack. The battle was extremely fierce, and the bottom of the lake was still letting out loud noises and collapsing. Even the ground quickly caved in. The lake water seeped out from the ground and spread all the way to the distance. No one knew where it led to. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Tang Zheng and the others had already escaped to the shore. Turning their heads to look, they saw this apocalyptic scene, and all of them were greatly shocked. A battle of this level truly had the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene it was when the cultivators of this world ran amok. Back then, there were cultivators who were even more powerful than the 100 transformations Star-Lord. They even had the legendary divine might to split the heavens and earth apart. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene that was. Lan Yu saw Marshall in Tang Zheng's embrace and asked with concern, "What happened to Marshall?" "She was poisoned by the Imperial Advisor's goo. Her life or death is unknown." Tang Zheng looked at Marshall, whose eyes were tightly shut, and said worriedly. Lan Yu's expression changed slightly. She had only heard of the goo poison, but she had never heard of it before. Lan Yu had deep feelings for Marshall, and they were like mother and daughter. Lan Yu said anxiously, "Then what method is there to save him?" "The antidote is in the hands of the Imperial Advisor." "Where is the Imperial Advisor?" Looking around, there was no trace of the Imperial Advisor. Just now, we were only concerned about escaping and didn't pay attention to the Imperial Advisor. Could it be that he was buried at the bottom of the cave? Tang Zheng said suspiciously. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. There was no way to verify the answer. If they couldn't find the Imperial advisor, then there was no antidote for the goo. Tang Zheng's expression immediately became even uglier. He looked at Marshall anxiously and said, "Let's leave this place first and then think of a way to save her." Everyone nodded in agreement. Wu Junshan looked deeply at Li Xiaotian, who was beside him. Li Palace and Li Xiaotian had a huge grudge. If they killed Li Xiaotian now, she would definitely have no way to resist. Li Xiaotian's expression tightened as she looked worriedly at Wu Junshan. She was also aware of the danger she was in. Her heart started to beat uncontrollably, and even her breathing became hurried. Wu Junshan snorted. He had already determined from Li Xiaotian's action of hugging Marshall that she was in an alliance with his side. Thus, he said, "Don't worry, I won't kill you, but it's only limited to this time. If I meet you again, I won't be merciful." Not only did Grandma Li cause the Marshall sect to fall apart, she even revealed our whereabouts to the Imperial advisor's residence. I will remember this debt and personally settle it with her in the future. Li Xiaotian's body relaxed. She knew she had temporarily passed this hurdle. Tang Zheng looked deeply at her and added, "Li Xiaotian, you still haven't told me the truth. You coming to the island nation to treat the emperor was just a pretense. Your true goal was to investigate the strength of the Imperial advisor's residence. Humph, I will also remember this debt. In the future, I will definitely not believe your words." His tone was firm and resolute. Li Xiaotian's body trembled. She wanted to say something, but hesitated. But in the end, she gave up helplessly and faintly sighed. Her lie was finally exposed. The relationship between the two sides that seemed to have improved immediately fell to the freezing point. Li Xiaotian was very dejected, but there was nothing she could do. "Let's go," Lan Yu urged. The dozens of people quickly fled the lake. The 100-change Star Sovereign had been watching them. When she saw that they were about to escape, she immediately turned her spearhead towards them. "All of you stop right there. Don't even think about escaping." The 100-change Star Sovereign angrily roared. Her small hand grabbed at the air, and the lake water immediately condensed into a long spear. She quickly attacked everyone. Wu Junshan stopped and turned to face the long spear. Without turning his head, he shouted, "You guys go quickly. I will cover the rear." Tang Zheng's expression was slightly strange. The others all stopped and shouted, "We will lend you a hand, Sect Master." "Stop right there. You want to disobey my order?" Wu Junshan roared. "Lan Yu, take them away." Lan Yu looked deeply at her husband and gritted her teeth. "Let's go." She took the lead and fled the lake. The others had no choice but to flee. They could only hear the rumbling sounds of fighting behind them. The sky shook as if the end of the world had arrived. Everyone had already fled far away, but the rumbling sounds of fighting were still ear-piercing. It was as if they were right next to their ears. "There are dead people." Suddenly, someone shouted. There were dead bodies lying in the grass beside the road. Tang Zheng glanced and immediately determined, these people are from the Imperial advisor's residence. When they were chasing the Imperial advisor earlier, they did not see this corpse. This meant that they had just died. "There are more in front," someone exclaimed. "There are more here. There are more over there." The goo worm had obviously sped up the speed at which it killed its host. Helpless, Tang Zheng could only withdraw his genuine qi from her heart. Her heartbeat sped up a bit, and her breathing became a bit stronger. Tang Zheng was like dead ash. He was extremely dejected. This method still did not work. Looking at Marshall, who was like a sleeping beauty, and clearly feeling the life force gradually fading from her body. Tang Zheng felt as if a knife was being twisted. Lan Yu sighed inwardly. She understood the feeling of being unable to reverse the situation. Back then, when Tang Zheng died, she had almost collapsed and had nothing left to live for. At this moment, Tang Zheng's mood was not much different. Lan Yu patted his shoulder and comforted him. If Marshall knew about your feelings for her, even if there was nothing she could do, she would still be very gratified. Although the two of you usually don't get along, I can tell that she likes you. Tang Zheng did not say a word, but his heart ached even more. It's a pity that the heavens are not on your side. Otherwise, the two of you would really be a match made in heaven. Perhaps the heavens are truly jealous of you, which is why they forcefully separated you two. I promised her that I would save her, Tang Zheng said in a daze. Lan Yu's eyes were moist as she choked with sobs and said, "Sometimes a person's strength is really weak. It can't solve all problems." Tang Zheng obviously understood this point, but he really didn't want Marshall to die like this. At this last moment, he finally understood his own heart. The two of them had experienced so much together, and although it was not a pleasant period of time, Marshall had unknowingly walked into his heart and occupied a very important position. His teeth bit deeply into his lips, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, but he was completely unaware. His eyes involuntarily turned red, and he couldn't help but lean over and gently kiss her lips. He had never kissed her so gently before. Although the two of them had already kissed each other a few times, that was when Tang Zheng's pure yang force was activated. His consciousness had already sunk into chaos, and it was more of an instinct than a feeling that came from the bottom of his heart. This kiss did not contain any desire, but it was filled with deep emotions that came from the bottom of his heart. The blood on Tang Zheng's lips dyed Marshall's lips red, and the blood seeped in through his teeth. As their lips parted, Tang Zheng carried her by the waist and said, "I'll take her to admire the moonlight. I've never truly accompanied her before." Woo! A cry finally broke out of Lan Yu's throat. She hurriedly covered her mouth, but it was still difficult to hide her sobbing. Tears had already flowed out of her eyes as she stared at Tang Zheng's tall figure and Marshall, who was in his embrace. Marshall's figure was tall, and being held in Tang Zheng's embrace, he did not feel like a little bird, but rather like a sleeping mermaid. Lan Yu nodded incessantly and said, "You guys can go. Accompany her properly." Lan Yu knew that Marshall's life had already come to an end, and there was no other way. Tang Zheng had already accepted this reality, so he planned to accompany her on the final journey of her life. Tang Zheng's eyes were moist. His legs felt as if they were filled with lead, as heavy as 1,000 caddies. He walked towards the balcony step by step, as if he had used up all of his strength, and every step was incomparably heavy. He sat on the balcony with Marshall in his arms. The snow-white moonlight shone down from the sky, covering everything on the ground in a layer of silver. Bathed in the moonlight, Marshall's face was suffused with a holy radiance. Her exquisite facial features caused one's heart to palpitate, but at this moment, her face was haggard. She no longer had her usual valiant appearance, causing one's heart to ache so much that it was about to break. Tang Zheng gently caressed her cheek and muttered to himself, softly recalling the bits and pieces of the two of them. The scenes in his mind turned into words and came out of his mouth. Although it was simple, it was like the most moving words of love in the world, causing people to be moved. Lan Yu looked at the two of them from afar and vaguely heard Tang Zheng's voice. She started to sob again, her tears wetting her cheeks, and she couldn't help but fall into self-blame. She already knew that a large part of the reason why she was able to be saved this time was because of Marshall. If she hadn't discovered some clues and given Tang Zheng a lot of benefits, Tang Zheng wouldn't have come to the island nation. Then these people would only have a dead end. Therefore, everyone's lives were saved by Wu Yu. However, she could save others, but she could not save herself. All of this was caused by that damned imperial advisor. If he had not given Wu that pill, then everything would have been fine. Tang Zheng looked at her face in a daze. He regretted and blamed himself. Why did he treat her so coldly in the past? He did not say a single word of gentleness to her. He even impatiently protected her at all times. Now, even if he wanted to do everything he could to get back all of this, it was impossible. One would only know how precious it was after losing it. He finally knew how precious she was, but he was going to lose her forever. Fate really played tricks on people. Chapter 698. His tears had not dried, but the grief in Tang Zheng's heart had already gradually turned into anger, as if it was about to burst out of his chest and spurt out. Imperial Advisor, Heavenly Emperor, I want you to be buried with Marshall. Tang Zheng was hysterical as he gnashed his teeth and roared, Marshall, wait for me. I'll take revenge for you. Wait for me to come back. Tang Zheng turned his head and looked at Lan Yu. Lan Yu understood and immediately walked over. What are you going to do? The Imperial Advisor's whereabouts are unknown, so I'll go find the Heavenly Emperor. The fake Heavenly Emperor is dead, so the real Heavenly Emperor will also die and be buried with Marshall. Tang Zheng was filled with killing intent, as if he was a god of death. If God blocked him, he would kill God. If Buddha blocked him, he would destroy Buddha. Lan Yu wanted to say something, but hesitated. After hesitating for a moment, he said, I'll go with you. I'll go alone. Take good care of Marshall. Tang Zheng said without any room for refutation. Lan Yu stared deeply into his eyes, understanding his thoughts and emotions, and said, All right, you go, we'll wait for you. Tang Zheng leaped up and jumped down from the balcony on the second floor. A white light also jumped out from the building and jumped onto his shoulder, squeaking. Tang Zheng patted Xiao Bai's shoulder, understanding its thoughts, and said, Xiao Bai, today we will start a massacre, completely destroy the imperial palace, kill that damned heavenly emperor. Xiao Bai nodded his head heavily, his eyes flickering with flames. Whiz! Tang Zheng turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared without a trace. The security of the imperial palace was extremely tight. Ever since Tang Zheng had caused a ruckus in the imperial residence, this area had entered a state of high alert, combining the light and the dark to cast an inescapable net. After such a long time, there were no longer any abnormalities. So many of the guards' vigilance had weakened by a lot. In addition, the Heavenly Emperor had reappeared, and everything was on the right track. That gave people a huge reassurance. The repair work of the Kokyo was already underway. The Kokyo was one of the spiritual symbols of the island nation. Of course, it couldn't be in such a dilapidated state. The royal family was already very familiar with controlling the feelings of the people. The ordeal this time would not be a blow to them. If they handled it properly, it could even be used as an opportunity to stimulate the people again, gather them together, and work hard to make another leap in the country's strength. Just like after the war, the aftermath of the island nation did not cause the island nation to be unable to recover from the setback. Instead, the people were filled with absolute enthusiasm, causing the country to undergo earth-shaking changes in a short period of time. The national strength soared like a rocket. In the emperor's bedroom, a group of ministers sat around. These were the core figures of the island nation's power. The Sky Emperor sat on the chair, coincidentally the chair that Tang Zheng felt was extremely strange. If Tang Zheng saw it again, he would definitely recognize it. This chair was a miniature version of the Yamada no Orochi. The 8 lifelike heads were no different from the Yamada no Orochi. The island nation's royal family had unknowingly exposed their relationship with the Yamada no Orochi. However, the world no longer knew about the Yamada no Orochi, so they did not discover this secret. The emperor of the island nation knew that his biggest reliance was the Yamada no Orochi. Therefore, he made this chair based on the Yamada no Orochi. It was a symbol of the royal family's power, just like the dragon throne of Huaxia. The emperor looked dispirited, and there was a sickly look between his eyebrows. He was indeed very different from the substitute. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that he was seriously ill. It was indeed inappropriate for him to show his face in public. It was no wonder that he found a substitute. What happened at the imperial advisor's residence? Why is there no news from the people you sent? The emperor coughed violently and asked with an unhappy expression, "Your Majesty, the Grand Preceptor's mansion's array formation has been destroyed, and there is a very fierce battle inside. As for the specific situation, our people have not yet sent back any news, so we have to wait a little longer." A minister bowed slightly and said respectfully, "Wait, you only know how to make me wait. Do you think I have to wait until everything is settled?" The emperor slapped the armrest of the chair and said angrily, "The others did not know that the most important thing in the imperial advisor's residence was the Yamada no Orochi and not the imperial advisor. They only thought that the emperor was concerned about the imperial advisor's safety. Therefore, they comforted him. Your Majesty, please rest assured. The imperial advisor is a master of a generation. His cultivation is unfathomable. Even if there is an enemy, it will be difficult for them to hurt him. They will definitely be defeated by him." What do you know? What nonsense! The emperor said, unhappily, "Send more people into the imperial advisor's residence. However, you must give them a death order. No matter what they see, they are not allowed to leak a single word to the outside world. Otherwise, they will be killed without mercy." The emperor gave the death order. If the Yamada no Orochi was exposed to the news, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. The emperor did not want this kind of exposure. Although the ministers did not understand the deeper meaning, they still respectfully accepted the order. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside. Everyone's nerves immediately tensed up. Tang Zheng coldly snorted and said, "I can't hear your bird language. You have harmed the martial arts. I want all of you to be buried with me." If Su Yingtian saw this scene, he would probably be scared out of his wits. He was very different from Tang Zheng. Because of his official status, he would weigh the pros and cons before doing anything. He could not be like Tang Zheng, who did as he pleased. Tang Zheng's actions this time would really provoke a war between the two countries and even trigger the Third World War. But Tang Zheng's heart was filled with anger. He did not care about these things. Seeing a group of island nation people, the war soul in his hand did not hesitate to kill. Puff! The enemy at the front was immediately cut in half. Immediately, blood splattered everywhere and dyed the palace red. Screams rose and fell. Those powerless ministers were so scared that they were about to become idiots. Some even lost control of their bowels and were in a sorry state. The emperor didn't have time to go far. He turned his head to look and was immediately scared to death. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. He muttered to himself, "It's him. This demon is here again. Hurry up and stop him. Stop him." The heavenly emperor had already recognized Tang Zheng and was both shocked and overwhelmed with shock. He had always sent out elite troops to search for this person's whereabouts, but in the end, it was as if the other party had disappeared from the face of the earth. Why did he rush into the imperial palace like a madman today? Did he really think that this was a public toilet? Did he really think that he could come and go as he pleased? The emperor felt bitter in his heart. In the history of the emperor, he had never been as sullen as he was. In just a short span of 10 days, he had been killed twice in his headquarters. As the ruler of a country, even the dignity of this country had been completely swept away. Protect the emperor. Protect the emperor. Someone shouted loudly as he pulled the emperor and quickly retreated. Tang Zheng saw the emperor from afar. He would never forget that familiar figure for the rest of his life. Thus, he roared, "Emperor, I'm going to kill you." When the emperor heard this, he staggered and fell to the ground. His originally weak body was actually unable to get up. When the guard saw this, he immediately picked him up and carried him on his shoulder. Then he ran away without stopping. Tang Zheng wanted to kill the emperor, but the palace was already surrounded by guards. Over 100 guards completely blocked the way out. Kill! The guards' eyes turned red as they roared. Tang Zheng could not hear the island nation's language, but he could feel the monstrous killing intent. Thus, with a flash of light, the War Soul sword disappeared and was replaced by the heaven-shocking bow and shooting sun arrows. The bowstring trembled, and the shooting sun arrow left the bowstring. The powerful shockwave caused the enemies in front of him to be blown away like straw in the wind. Many of them had their chests pierced through and died on the spot. The remaining power of the shooting sun arrows had not dissipated, and had actually pierced through the Sky Emperor's chair. The dragon throne that was imitating the Yamada no Orochi immediately disintegrated, turning into dust. Taking advantage of the path that was swept out, Tang Zheng jumped up and followed the trajectory of the shooting sun arrows, quickly escaping from the palace. The others wanted to chase, but their speed could not be compared to Tang Zheng's. Kill! Tang Zheng's beard and hair flew wildly, like a god of death. Wherever he went, the enemies would all fall to the ground. However, there were not as many enemies as there were in the main hall, so they were unable to restrain his footsteps. After a while, he rushed out of the back door of the palace. In front of him was a long passageway with carved beams and painted rafters. The flowers on both sides were blooming, and the scenery was pleasant. However, at this moment, the scenery was stained with blood, turning into an azure field. Tang Zheng's heart was as stiff as iron, without the slightest bit of mercy or leniency. He was not such a bloodthirsty person, but the situation of Marshall had deeply stimulated him. Adding on the hatred he had for the island nation since he was young, he did not have the slightest bit of mercy. In front of him, there was a blaze, and Tang Zheng shivered. He understood that he had caught up to the target, so he increased his speed and soon arrived at the scene. The few people on the ground had already been burned to charcoal, and Xiaobai was fiercely attacking a person. This person was also dressed as a guard, but his strength was completely different, completely crushing the other guards. Great master martial artist. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted, and with a glance, he could see through the details of this person. This person was tall and strong, and was much taller and more powerful than the average island nation person. His muscles were strong and powerful, and his veins were bulging high, like small pythons winding around his body, bulging his clothes. This person is even more powerful than the great master martial artist beside the substitute, although he is relatively young. Tang Zheng muttered to himself, but his feet seemed to have gathered wind, and he arrived at the scene. The Sky Emperor fell to the ground, panting like a cow, sweating profusely, and looking at the two sides of the battle with a pale face. When he saw Tang Zheng rushing over, a look of despair immediately appeared in his eyes. Chapter 700. Life. The Emperor was stunned like he had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. Whose life do you want to save? I have the best medical resources in the world that can help you. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. Since the imperial tutor was the one who poisoned her, then did the emperor have an antidote? Seeing Tang Zheng hesitate, the emperor knew that he had found the right antidote. He continued, "Life is important. Even if you kill me, you won't be able to bring her back to life, right? Why don't you think of a way to save her?" Tang Zheng's eyes turned cold. "Do you know about the goo poison?" "What is the goo poison?" the emperor blurted out. However, he realized something and immediately changed his words. "Goo poison, right? Of course I know about it. I have the antidote." Tang Zheng shook his head. His eyes turned cold. "You don't even know about the goo poison, and you still want to lie to me." The emperor really did not know about the goo poison. However, he was not willing to give up on this chance. He impatiently said, "Although I don't know about the goo poison, I can send people to investigate. I will definitely find the antidote." Tang Zheng shook his head. Even if he found the imperial tutor and used the emperor's life to threaten him, the imperial tutor might not do anything. After all, the conflict between the two sides had escalated to an unprecedented level. It was a life and death situation. They wanted to see the other side die. So why would they save someone? Tang Zheng tossed these unrealistic thoughts to the back of his mind and looked at the emperor expressionlessly. The emperor realized that something was wrong. He used all his strength to lie in front of Tang Zheng and said, "I am the ruler of a country. I can fulfill any of your wishes as long as you ask." "It's too late. Back then, when you invaded Huaxia, did you spare the lives of those who begged you? No. You created so many massacres, and now you refuse to admit it. You even changed the history books. You are the most despicable people in the world. You still want to live in this world. Impossible." Tang Zheng's answer was resolute and decisive, cutting off all hope for the emperor to survive. He raised his head once more and looked at Tang Zheng with disdain. "If you kill me, the island nation and Huaxia will fall into war. You will drag both countries into an irrecoverable situation. You will be the sinner of history." Tang Zheng laughed disapprovingly. "Ha! You really think too highly of yourself. You also think too highly of the island nation. Let me tell you, Huaxia is not the same as before. It is no longer the weak country of a few decades ago. Huaxia is strong and has long stood tall in the world. On the contrary, it is your island nation that has always been living in arrogance and wants to start another war. I will wait and see. When the time comes, I will let your country have a taste of Huaxia." The emperor's expression kept changing. Shame, anger, unsightly, and anger intertwined. He stared viciously at Tang Zheng and shouted hysterically, "There will be a day when the island nation's juniors will complete the unfinished business of the island nation's juniors. We will once again set foot on your land, burn, kill, and rob. We will make your Huaxia people be slaves for generations to come." The emperor had already fallen into madness and was shouting nonstop. There was no anger on Tang Zheng's face. He only felt that this person was too pitiful. He had lived in delusion for his entire life. Could such a thing happen? Absolutely impossible. When you go to hell, open your eyes wide and watch carefully. There will be a day when your island nation will suffer 100 times, 1,000 times the pain that was inflicted on Huaxia. Tang Zheng finished coldly. Shua. His hand rose, and the sword fell. The emperor's head fell to the ground and rolled far away like a rubber ball. The screams of the island nation people were getting closer and closer. Tang Zheng nodded to Xiao Bai and said, "Xiao Bai, burn this place." Xiao Bai nodded and jumped into the air. Flames spewed out from his small mouth and instantly covered all the palaces. The Kokyo was completely turned into a sea of fire. The The reinforcements who rushed over were trapped in the sea of fire and fled madly. Tang Zheng and Xiao Bai left the Kokyo, leaving behind the raging fire behind them. That night, the island nation was not peaceful. The world was shaken. Even if the island nation wanted to cover it up, there was no way. This was because the news had already spread on the internet. There were pictures, videos, and everything else. Among them, there was even a blurred image of Tang Zheng's back. He stood in the middle of the raging fire with a sword in one hand and a small child standing on his shoulder. He was peerless and independent. The world was shocked. Many people began to search for the identity of this assassin. Was it someone from the island nation or someone else? Most people did not know. Of course, the news of the emperor's death spread like the plague. The Kokyo and the emperor were completely finished by this assassin. The island nation people immediately hated this assassin to the bone. As for the people of other countries, their feelings were much more complicated. Every country announced that they had nothing to do with this matter. Moreover, they righteously condemned such an irresponsible and vile action. Huaxia was no exception. It was one of the countries with the harshest words. However, that picture had already been placed on the conference table of Huaxia's higher-ups. As long as one was familiar with Tang Zheng, it was not difficult to recognize him from this picture. Especially Xiao Bai's figure, it was too obvious. A man, a sword, and an animal. This combination, in this world, was probably only Tang Zheng alone. When Su Yingtian held this picture, he almost fell to the ground in fright. It would definitely not be a good thing for the National Security Bureau. Xing Feng also raised his head and looked over. When their eyes met, Xing Feng's eyes were filled with a smug smile. There was even a hint of ridicule. Su Yingtian snorted inwardly and became alert. He was afraid that tonight would not be easy. When the others saw this person, they all stood up. This person stretched his hand out and gestured for everyone to take a seat. Everyone waited for him to take a seat before they took their seats. Xing Feng explained the situation. This person said in a deep voice. Xing Feng's expression turned cold as he said, "Tonight, a shocking matter happened in our neighboring island nation. The emperor and the imperial palace were completely destroyed and turned into a pile of ashes. The mastermind behind all of this is the person in the picture." Everyone immediately looked at the picture before them. Someone narrowed his eyes and looked at it for a moment before he said, "It's just a back view. I can't tell who it is." Xing Feng seemed to have expected such an answer as he mysteriously smiled. Those who aren't familiar with him naturally won't be able to tell, but those who are familiar with him will be able to recognize him with a single glance. Everyone's interest was piqued as they asked in surprise, "You're saying that you can already confirm the identity of this person?" Xing Feng purposely kept them in suspense as he turned to look at Su Yingtian and said, "Chief Su, you should be the one to answer this question, right?" Su Yingtian was unhappy in his heart. He wished that he could shoot Xing Feng. Xing Feng was purposely digging a hole for him to jump in, but he had no choice but to jump in. If he did not speak the truth, the consequences would be even more severe. Thus, he seriously looked at the picture and said, "We have also collected this information and are about to report it to the higher-ups. As for this person, we have already determined his identity." "Oh, who is it?" Everyone was curious as to who this fierce person was. Could it be someone from a terrorist organization? Tang Zheng. Su Yingtian took a deep breath and spat out 2 words. "This name seems a little familiar. It also seems to be the name of our Huaxia people." Someone muttered. The smile in Xing Feng's eyes deepened as he said, "Chief Su, since you have already determined the identity of the other party, then continue speaking." Su Yingtian knew that he could not avoid it, so he said truthfully, This person is from Huaxia. Wow. Immediately, many people were stunned. Even though they had experienced countless big battles and major events, they were still shocked by this news. A person from Huaxia burned the royal family of an island nation to ashes. That was not enough. He even killed the emperor. Chapter 701. The group of big shots looked at each other with mixed feelings. They were shocked beyond words by this news. Someone exclaimed, as if he had just woken up from a dream, "I finally remember that name. Tang Zheng. Isn't he the rising star?" Xing Feng looked at Su Yingtian meaningfully and added with a smile, "Not only that, he is also a special consultant of the National Security Bureau." This sentence immediately stirred up the nerves of the others, especially the few big shots, who immediately realized the awkwardness of Tang Zheng's clone. Tang Zheng had an official status, and he was also a consultant of the National Security Bureau. That would completely change the meaning of the matter. His personal actions would rise to official actions. This would cause friction between the two countries, and it would be seen as a very serious act of sabotage or even an act of aggression. The big shots couldn't help but sit up straight, and their faces became unprecedentedly serious. They looked at Su Yingtian with unfriendly gazes. "Director Su, what is your explanation?" Su Yingtian felt bitter in his heart and had to explain. "Tang Zheng is indeed a consultant of the National Security Bureau, but this action is his personal action." Is that so? This is your one-sided statement. Do you think the island nation will believe it?" Xing Feng asked with a fake smile. Everyone frowned at the same time, because the answer was self-evident. The island nation obviously wouldn't believe it. "Su Yingtian, you are messing around. Gathering this kind of person to join the National Security Bureau, and he is even a consultant. Is this a consultant who is here to cause trouble?" Someone couldn't help but slap the table and said angrily, "Su Yingtian has helped us a lot. The emperor's brother fell into our hands because of him. In addition, he has made many contributions, and his performance is very outstanding." Su Yingtian earnestly said good things for Tang Zheng. "Humph, so what if we have some achievements? The mess we made this time is much more serious than those trivial achievements. How do you think we should deal with the island nation if they hold us accountable?" Xing Feng asked with an unkind expression. Su Yingtian glared fiercely at Xing Feng. Xing Feng's lips curled up into a sinister smile. Su Yingtian gnashed his teeth in hatred, but there was nothing he could do. He could only say, "Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir." Today, why would the Huaxia fear an island nation? "Haha, easy for you to say." Xing Feng smiled as he continued, "Everyone listen to his irresponsible words. He's trying to drag the country into the fire pit. For such a person to still be in charge of the National Security Bureau, a national weapon, was a blasphemy to the country and an extremely irresponsible approach. One day, he will bring a bigger disaster and drag the country into a state of eternal damnation. No one could stop him. Thank you. I'll look for you when I go back in a few days. That's all for now." Tang Zheng had already seen the small building and quickly hung up the phone. Only Su Yingtian was left holding the phone. Finally, he could only sigh helplessly. Tang Zheng looked up and saw that there was no one on the balcony. His heart thumped. "You must wait for me. You must." Then he rushed into the small building like the wind and asked loudly, "Where is Marshall?" "The bedroom on the second floor. Whiz." He came to the bedroom door. The door was ajar, and Marshall was lying on the bed. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Lan Yu was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at Marshall with red eyes. "How is he?" Tang Zheng couldn't wait to ask. Lan Yu turned his head and said, You're finally back. She's still waiting for you." Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly walked to the bedside and held Marshall's hand. He found that her eyes were still closed and she was on the verge of death. "Marshall, I'm back. I've already avenged you. The emperor is dead, and the imperial palace has already turned to ashes," Tang Zheng said gently. Lan Yu was slightly startled. He never thought that Tang Zheng would go out and do such a shocking thing. He patted his shoulder and said with relief, "If Marshall knows about your intentions, he will definitely be very touched." Tang Zheng squeezed out a bitter smile from the corner of his mouth. "Stay with her for a while. I'll go out first." Lan Yu gave the time to the two of them. He gently closed the door and walked out. Tang Zheng took the opportunity to sit at the head of the bed and held her in his arms. Her body was still soft and supple. Looking at her face in a daze, Tang Zheng couldn't help but feel sorrowful. He had the urge to cry out loud. "Marshall, if the heavens give me another chance, I will definitely protect you well and accompany you forever. I will definitely not be impatient with you again," Tang Zheng muttered to himself. Suddenly, his eyes turned cold as he stared at her throat. His eyes revealed a strange light. Her throat started to move, as if something was crawling up her throat. It was very obvious. What's going on? He was shocked and immediately activated his innate qi into Marshall's body. In that instant, he knew everything about her body, like the back of his hand. The goo worm knew that its nemesis had arrived, so it hurriedly wrapped itself around Tang Zheng's heart. Tang Zheng felt that his breathing was becoming difficult as he clutched his chest and staggered backwards, only stopping when he hit the wall with a pung. Tang Zheng felt that his blood was rapidly flowing out. Even his life was rapidly leaving his body. In short, the signs of death had arrived. He stared deeply at the unconscious Marshall and said with relief, "Marshall, it's good that you're alive." His consciousness gradually became blurry. He felt as if he was about to float into the clouds and fall into a bottomless valley. In short, this feeling was very mysterious, but it was not good at all. Bang, 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 bang. Tang Zheng's heart started to beat rapidly. His speed did not slow down at all. Tang Zheng suddenly opened his eyes. It was as if a soul-stirring light flashed through his eyes. "I'm awake again." Tang Zheng's voice changed. It was heavy and dignified, causing one's heart to tremble in fear. This brat is really too weak. A small goo worm actually almost caused him to lose his life. Chi Yu's heart had awakened. This voice was Chi Yu's voice, filled with killing intent. Back then, in the crater in the northeast, it was because of the awakening of Chi Yu's heart that Tang Zheng was able to successfully absorb the dragon's soul and defeat the heavenly emperor's brother. This time, Chi Yu's heart was attacked by the goo worm. Chi Yu's consciousness had finally recovered. When he saw Tang Zheng's terrible situation, he could not help but complain. "Humph, just a small goo worm. Then use it as my nourishment," Chi Yu's heart said casually. As soon as he finished speaking, Chi Yu's heart emitted a bloody mist, which instantly enveloped the goo worm. As if the goo worm had seen its nemesis, it started to twist crazily, trying to break free from the restraints of Chi Yu's heart. You want to escape from such a small matter? Dream on," Chi Yu's heart said in disdain. Before he finished speaking, the goo worm started to struggle. It kept twisting and waving its tentacles. Bang! Suddenly, the goo worm exploded, turning into a cloud of mist that enveloped Chi Yu's heart. After a while, the mist completely seeped into Chi Yu's heart. Everything returned to normal. This kid's character is not bad. He is decisive in killing and has a firm heart. With some nurturing, he will be a promising talent. It's just that his cultivation is too weak. It's simply a disgrace to the reputation of the Nine-Yang Saint body. How can a person with the Nine-Yang Saint body only have such a little cultivation? Yamada no Orochi has come out. Even the 100 transformations, Star-Lord has come. This world is becoming more and more interesting. I really look forward to recovering my strength and rebuilding my glory. Chiyu's heart sighed. Tangzheng, what's wrong? Lan Yu's voice came from outside the door. Chapter 703. As soon as Lan Yu finished speaking, Marshall let out a murmur and faintly woke up. Tang Zheng and Lan Yu were overjoyed. They immediately surrounded him and asked with concern, "Marshall, how do you feel?" Marshall opened his eyes with difficulty, looked at Tang Zheng, and then at Lan Yu. He was wild with joy. "Mistress, I see you again." Lan Yu stroked Marshall's hair, his nose sour, and said emotionally, "Silly child, for us to travel thousands of miles to Island Nation, you almost lost your life. Marshall is useless. I was unable to save Master, Mistress, and all my fellow sect members." Marshall said in shame, his eyes wet. Lan Yu's face turned serious as he said, "Who dares to say that you're useless? I'll beat him up until his mother doesn't even recognize him." Marshall broke into a smile and said, "Where are Master and the others?" Lan Yu's expression stiffened as he comforted her. "Don't worry, the others are all outside. As for your master, he still has some matters to attend to. You just escaped danger, so you need to rest well." Marshall revealed a puzzled expression and said, "I only remember what happened before I fainted." "Who saved me?" Lan Yu smiled as he looked at Tang Zheng. Marshall's gaze turned as he asked, "You saved me?" "Of course, out of all of us, only he has the ability to do so. He almost lost his life because of it," Lan Yu said. Marshall's eyes revealed a moved expression, and a blush flashed across his face. He looked at Tang Zheng in a daze and said, "Thank you." Tang Zheng's face also blossomed with a brilliant smile. He subconsciously held her hand and said, "This is what I should do. You young people take your time to chat. I'll be leaving first." Lan Yu smiled meaningfully and even winked mysteriously at Marshall before closing the door and leaving. There were only 2 people left in the room, and they immediately fell into silence. The 2 of them looked at each other. Then Marshall hurriedly looked away. She had a clear feeling that the world after waking up was completely different from before, especially Tang Zheng's gaze, which was even softer and filled with deep affection. This was something that had never happened before, causing her heart to palpitate and her heart to race. Tang Zheng coughed and broke the silence. "Are you tired? Do you want to rest for a while?" "Not tired." Marshall blurted out, looked at him, and said, "In order to save me, you almost sacrificed yourself." "It's not that exaggerated," Tang Zheng said lightly, but the more he said this, the more certain Wu was that this was the case. He couldn't help but hold his hand. Tang Zheng's heart warmed, and he also held her hand tightly. Their eyes met, and this time they did not avoid each other's gaze. The 2 pairs of eyes that were close to each other silently communicated, transmitting each other's feelings. The atmosphere was changing bit by bit, and a mysterious feeling was brewing in the air. Wu Junshan, the shadow beside him, and even his wife are all top-notch experts. Compared to them, even I am slightly inferior, not to mention that childlike multiform Star-Lord. Who is he? How can he have such terrifying strength? There was still a lingering fear between his brows. In front of 100 Change Star-Lord, he had no resistance at all. He was like an ant that could be easily squashed to death. How is the battle between God, Orochi, and 100 Change Star-Lord? He looked at the sea, but could not see anything clearly. Kacha! Suddenly, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky and landed in the sea. Thick black, Clouds accumulated on the surface of the sea. Then, the rumbling of thunder sounded like a drum, deafening to the ears. This is their battle. The imperial teacher was frightened. Imperial preceptor. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind the imperial preceptor and knelt down with a thud. The imperial teacher turned around and saw his favorite disciple. He was pleasantly surprised. "Junko, are you okay?" Junko's face was as pale as paper. Her shoulders trembled as if she was terrified. She said in a trembling voice, "Junko was lucky to escape. The others are dead. They died in the hands of that child." When Junko recalled that scene, her heart felt like it was going to jump out of her throat. She had never seen such a powerful person in her entire life. He didn't even need to touch them. And the others were killed without being able to resist. It was not a simple killing, but a massacre. The strong, murderous aura emitted by the child's every movement made people unable to think of resisting. She had to overcome the fear in her heart with great difficulty to escape this calamity. The imperial teacher's expression did not change at all. He said lightly, "I know sacrifice is inevitable. Imperial teacher, we have to avenge them." Junko's eyes bloomed with flames of hatred as she said, resolutely. The imperial teacher showed a self-mocking smile and said, "Oh, revenge." He paused for a moment and said, "There is nothing I can do." Junko had never seen the imperial teacher so dispirited. After she escaped, she did not see the great battle just now. So she did not understand the situation in front of her. "It's over. Everything is settled," the imperial teacher said dispiritedly. As if to prove this sentence, the thunder and lightning on the sea stopped. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.